and welcome back to Magic in the Noise. Today we have an exciting show. We are going to be talking all kinds of things. We're going to be talking about Chris Bledsoe, who is a controversial figure in the UFO community, in the conspiracy theory community, and in the remote viewing community a little bit as well. And so we'll talk about the results we got from remote viewing the lady and the star alignment that he's prophesized is going to bring about some kind of a change. A little bit about us before we start. I am Sasha, and I'm the co-founder of Magic in the Noise. We are a remote viewing think tank. And so we do remote viewing, we teach remote viewing, we research new ways, better ways to do remote viewing. We publish, now we're publishing books as well. David is going to tell us a little bit about his book in a moment. We're very excited to be here. We do these live streams once a month, and sometimes we do a second one a month. Sometimes we've done one closed group meeting as our second live stream target feedback meeting for the month. And we might, very likely we're going to do that for July. So if you're in the audience and you're thinking about remote viewing a little bit or thinking about submitting your work, please do. We're very kind. We're very open. And I always try to make the viewers shine with the data that they submit. So that's all about me. And now David will introduce himself.
Hi, David here, the other half of Magic in the Noise. And Sasha had mentioned I had just put out a new book a couple days ago called Beyond the Veil of Sight. And the book covers primarily the concept that CRV, if you look at the documentation, actually forbids you to look at the target directly with direct visual perception. And so the book kind of discusses some of the ideas around that along with... sorry, I got distracted there for a second. Sorry,
David. I tried to put you as the primary face so that people could see
That's
you.
okay. It's all good.
It didn't work.
It's all good. So anyways, yeah, so it kind of revolves around that concept, and the other pieces of information in there kind of tie back in with what was Ingo Swann doing, as an example, pre-Stargate or pre-CIA when he worked for SRI. Was he using the same kinds of approach with visuals, or was he doing something different? How does that link in? How does this process kind of link in the direct visual perception with the work of Warcalier, which is a researcher? He's a researcher from France, if I'm not mistaken, and he focused on telepathy in the early 1900s. And his research, they actually did direct visual perception. And so it's kind of looking at a comparison of all this information along with my own observation of the process for directly seeing a target. So I kind of walk through my own internal observations of that process, share those insights as well. And so the book it basically primarily focuses on direct visual perception of information through remote viewing, but it would also be relevant to clairvoyant kind of approach or other things like that. Maybe even people who take hallucinogens might benefit just from some of the knowledge of the information conceptually. So anyways, that's it. And excited to see what everybody brought back today on the target.
Thank you, David. And Claudia?
Hi, I'm Claudia from the Netherlands. I'm working with the remote viewing now around 3 years. I follow Sasha's method, full spectrum illumination, and I'm very happy to be in this group. I love it. You should take a try. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. That's wonderful. And Chris?
Hey everyone, I'm Chris, also known as Chilio. I have a channel where I post some of my RV stuff. I haven't been very active lately because I have not a lot of time, but I'll try to post some new stuff in the near future.
Thank you, Chris. And Chris, you can put your link in the comments for the YouTube chat if you want. And John.
Hi, I'm John. I'm from Kansas City. United States, and I have been remote viewing for about a year and a half, and I use the TDRB methodology, and I think that's it.
Nice. Thank you, John. And we have Cody.
I'm Cody. I've been remote viewing for about 4.5 years, and the method I use is CRB.
Nice. And then finally, we have Michael. Oh, Michael, can you hear us? I think he's having audio issues. So when you can jump right in. And David, do you want to let him know maybe? Yeah, thank you. And so thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being here. The viewers did great work, and the data is surprising. This is a sign of great remote viewing. I think when you don't get the cookie cutter response, it does mean that there's more analysis and there's more interpretation. And so as an audience, I hope people will, let us know what you think about the data, about your own impressions. If you've done remote viewing on this target yourselves for this tasking, but you didn't submit it, or for another tasker, we'd love to hear what you got. And whether your results correspond with ours. As a tasker, I do my best to stay neutral on topics. So just to not take a position, to not have a belief. I can, if you want me to argue that something is real, I can do that. If you want me to argue 10 minutes later that it's not real, I can do that. And so I think that makes a better tasker when you don't necessarily have very rigid set ideas. Because then when I task something like this, I'm not injecting any of my own beliefs into the tasking about whether it was a UFO or whether it wasn't, or whether Chris Bledsoe is legitimate, or whether he's some kind of an alphabet agency plant. And so we're going to look at that in a moment. But that is one thing for remote viewers out there who are also acting as taskers. I think it's really good to develop that neutral state, the ability to entertain contradictory ideas and not have that be a problem for you. Just say, when this model is useful, I use this model. When this other one is useful, I'll use this other one. And you're going to see that today in my slides, where I'm talking about things. If I'm talking about it in a way that doesn't fit your model of reality, that's okay, because I'm not saying this is how reality is. I'm simply saying this is the model through which I'm interpreting the data today. And you can interpret it through different models. And I do try to be sensitive to that. But there are some issues today where I was like, okay, I have to use a model for that. And we're going to do that. Michael, are you back on audio?
I am, yes.
Wonderful. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, my name is Michael. I've been practicing remote viewing for a year and a half, and full spectrum illumination / methods since the start of this year. So that's kind of what I've been exploring, having fun with. So I'm just happy to share and be on the call with you all today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for being here. And in the audience, if you want to learn full spectrum remote viewing, you can send us a message. You can contact us by leaving a message in the comments, or sending us an email, or we're on Patreon, we're on Facebook, we're on all the places. That's not true. We're not on TikTok and Instagram. Really, we're not active there. And please don't message us on Twitter. Email is always better. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing the data, and then everyone can just jump in as they want to. When I'm presenting, I can see the slides, but I can't focus on the data I'm presenting, and also the faces of the viewers that are here in the chat. And so I just want everyone to jump in and interrupt me, and it's all fine. I won't mind at all. Okay, so now let me share screen, and then we can start. And everyone can let me know if that works. Did that work? Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so the target for this month was the lady that Chris Bledsoe claims to have had interactions with, and the message that he claims she gave him about a coming special alignment with the star Regulus, and the timing of the alignment and its meaning, and other things along those lines. And so let's just jump into it if I can. There we go. A little bit about Chris Bledsoe. So he is considered to be a UFO experiencer. He is a strong believer in God, and so the Christian community has really rallied around him. There's a lot of division between the Christian community and the UFO alien community. So he's someone in between. So it's been interesting to see how he's navigating that. He talks about this experience that he's had. He's written books about it now with his son, with his family members. He's had some of these with groups now. He's organizing groups to see UAPs together. The MUFON, which is the UFO networking group, they sent a representative to investigate his claims when he first came out with them. And they did not believe that he was legitimate. And so there's a lot of friction there. And then 3-letter agencies got involved, and they seemed to be treating him as though his claims were legitimate. So there's a little bit of weirdness there that we can use remote viewing to try to investigate or explore. At the moment, Chris Bledsoe, his son, his family members, the people that he does workshops with, they are still having these experiences. They're still seeing lights and all the rest. So it's an interesting ongoing story about what's happening and whether it's real and what's the underlying phenomenon all about. I do think it's interesting that Chris Bledsoe does not have a Wikipedia page. I think you have to have a certain amount of influence to not have a Wikipedia page to prevent someone from starting one for you. So I find that just an interesting little tidbit for people to make of what they want. So diving into the data, I just wanted to start with this because I'm talking about Chris Bledsoe and who he is. Claudia, you described this man, and I think you did a really good job. To me, it really does seem like you were describing Chris. So why don't you tell us a few things about your data here?
Well, yeah. Well, I started with the attribute, and then I really saw this square face and with his sharp nose. But I pictured him with a suit and some military badges or something like that. And I was this afternoon after the target reveal checking whether he had anything like that, but I could not find that. But he did write a book, and and he's from the USA. Yeah, I noticed that I more often pick up on authors who write books, because I had this also with the other Lou. What's his name?
Elizondo.
Yeah.
Yes, we did a target Lou Elizondo's UFO under the water. We did that a couple of months ago.
Yeah. Well, it was more like automatic writing. Yeah. So
one of the things I wanted to say, your data makes me wonder if he is perhaps involved in the military in some way. So I think that that's maybe an open question. But the fact that you did get that, he wrote a book, I think you got good descriptors for his face, his thin lips, his small eyes. I think it's a really good job of remote viewing for a person. And it was interesting to me, John, you also saw that there was tons of knowledge or data that was involved in this target. And you said like there's a book's worth. And I thought that was a nice little wink at Chris being an author. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it was the perception I got was like it's like oftentimes I'll see like someone next to a book or something, and then that will lead the perception move into something else. I saw like a book, and then all of a sudden I saw like volumes and volumes and shelves and shelves and shelves of books. So to me, I took that as there's a lot to this, or it has something to do with a lot of data or information. That was it. That's all I got out of that.
I felt that way this morning at 5 a.m. when the data, there was still so much data to process. I thought of that piece of data in your work, and I was like, was he just seeing me drowning in like all this data and this research? And the thing is, when I do analysis, I have to do research, right? I had to figure out what is this data piece, what is the piece of data telling me, and what does it mean? And so there's, and because I'm a little bit on the spectrum, I do get, I don't want to say obsessed, but I wouldn't not say it either. But I do get very interested in some of these topics. And so I get really immersed. And it's good though, because it allows for more discoveries to be made. But it does mean it's a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of data. And then trying to figure out, how do I now synthesize this down to something that I can communicate in a reasonable amount of time? So yeah, so I did think that it was nice to see a few people picking up on the author side of him. So that was good data. Let's talk a little bit about the encounter with the lady, because we're going to see as we progress through it how much data we did get and didn't get about the lady. So this is in 2012. Chris claimed he was visited by a radiant angelic female being during an emotional, spiritually intense experience. And then he described her in ways that we have seen other people describe Virgin Mary-like apparitions: glowing, benevolent, sense of calm and compassion and ancient power kind of coming off of her. And she communicated with him telepathically. And so this is a pattern that's not unique to him. And I think that's what made it kind of interesting as a remote viewing target. And then there's the secret message. So one of the messages that she gave him involved the star Regulus. And the star Regulus is also known as the heart of the lion, because it's located in the constellation Leo. So she told Bledsoe that when Regulus aligns, but he hasn't made it clear aligns with what, it would mark the beginning of a great spiritual awakening or some kind of a transformation for humanity. And Regulus was described as an important celestial marker, also energetically and prophetically. And so it's interesting that we only have part of the message. And then there's a lot of again, the messaging that we see around these types of apparitions: divine feminine wisdom, healing the earth, preparing for a time of reckoning or enlightenment. And no one is ever really clear, is this going to be all love and light, or is this going to be something really traumatic and destructive, but the survivors will have love and light? Not too clear. So we're going to look at the data about that as well. And then here is the star Regulus. There are different ways. This is something I wanted to talk a little bit about because it really matters here for this particular analysis and the data. The zodiac system that we use changes. So different cultures have used slightly different animals, slightly different shapes, slightly different stars. So some will include these stars, but not those ones. And there are patterns that, there's star gods, star myths of the world by Matheson Crowlery. This is the book by this YouTube channel researcher, esoteric kind of person. And he's looked at all this ancient art and found patterns that match. So constellations that were slightly different from the ones that we're taught today. And when you unlock the imagery behind those, then you can decode a lot of ancient art, a lot of Renaissance art, some esoteric art, some secret society group art, things like this. And so what I've done for this one is usually I use the pattern of constellations that were provided to us by H.A. Rey. And so people can look that up if they want. The last name is Rey, because he was using the same patterns that the ancients used. So when we look at ancient Greek pottery that has gods on them, the god figures that they have actually map onto the constellations that are depicted in H.A. Rey's methodology. And so I've used a little bit of both. But what I found, which I thought was just fascinating, was that the remote viewers' data came through using these ancient patterns of the constellations. So that's I think really fascinating. Some of them are using the more traditional patterns, and so I'll show you both. Yeah, there we go. So here's an example where we can see the star Regulus in both different kinds of representations of the constellation. Regulus is one of the 4 royal stars of ancient Persia, that's today's Iran, and it was considered a guardian or watcher of the heavens. And it's interesting that its alignments are seen as heralding major shifts in leadership, power structures, consciousness. So this kind of lines up with the message of the lady about some kind of a shift coming. And yeah, so there we see Regulus in the constellation of Leo. Here's a little bit, because this is going to be relevant for the data that comes in next. So the royal stars, there's 4 of them. They're Aldebaran, Regulus, Antares, and Fomalhaut. And they are Taurus the bull. So in Taurus, we have Aldebaran, and that is both a star and a constellation that's depicted all throughout history for encoding different messages. And then Leo, who we link to the Sphinx of Egypt, and that's Regulus. And then then we have Antares in Scorpio. That's what it is. And Fomalhaut we don't really talk about much, but he's in the fish that floats around under Aquarius. So Aquarius is throwing his pitcher of water down, and underneath him there's Pisces. What is it? Astronus. And yeah, and so one of the royal stars, Fomalhaut, is in there. So these are just some of the brighter stars that were brightest in the sky at some point in our history. And so one of the points in Chris Bledsoe's book, UFO of God, he talks about an encounter with not just this lady, but a translucent bull that appeared alongside the lady. And it's interesting that the bull was translucent. So people have kind of speculated, is it a symbol for the constellation Taurus when they're trying to figure out what the timing is for this event that the lady was prophesying? And so the lady appearing to him with a bull, I guess the symbol of that would be some of the bull goddess deity mythology in some of our ancient cultures. And so we have Ishtar, Hathor, and the bull, and they're all connected through mythology and symbolism, as we can read here. And so we saw, John, you had the horns. You have the woman as like a dead or a spirit, something like a ghost or bride. And I can see the bride aspect because she's wearing all white. And one thing that I saw in yours that I also saw mentioned, and we might see it in some of the other people's sessions, is the idea of the fabric. People were telling me all about cotton and skeletons wrapped in cotton. And that was a really funny little piece of data that came through for everyone there. So did you want to tell us a little bit, John, about this idea of the dead spirits? I know it's just a small piece of data on one of your last pages, but I'd like you to talk about that if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I had a number of things kind of along those lines in my session, but that one, the perception of the lady, or what I thought it was a kind of a female spirit, was it came just really faintly in my matrix. I wasn't even really probing for anything. I just had this really faint image of this female or feminine entity with like kind of shrouded, but it felt like it was a spirit. And so I barely caught it, and I just like, well, I better write that down, even though it wasn't where I was probing for. And the same thing with the horns. I was actually probing for like topology, like a shape of whatever the target was, and I just saw this like kind of bullhead. I drew it just with horns, but yeah, it was interesting. Kind of came out of nowhere. It's kind of how it all works, I guess.
That's how the best data comes through. It just sneaks in and surprises you. So yeah, that was nice to see. And nice that you picked up on it and you did write it down, because I saw as well, right? Like it was coming through in a part of your data where maybe you, like you said, you weren't necessarily probing for that specifically. And so I'm glad you wrote it down. So you see that the horns, that's the Taurus with the Aldebaran sitting there as well. And Taurus and Aldebaran, they're also guiding stars. So you find other constellations by using them. You find the Pleiades, you look at Orion's belt, you line it up with Aldebaran, and then it leads you to the Pleiades. So it is an important star in a lot of star systems. And so I wanted to also bring up the Ishtar and the Bull of Heaven, because it seems that that's the symbol that he's evoking. Ishtar is a Mesopotamian goddess associated with fertility, love, and war, but also the spring equinox. A lot of people link her to Easter, and that's not a strongly supported link. But she is associated with the spring equinox. And so, one of the things that Chris Bledsoe said was that the timing that he thinks it might occur, this big event, this big change, Easter of 2026. And so, there's something there, that link with Ishtar. Um, Interestingly enough, not only does she appear with the bull of heaven, but her symbols include the lion and the eight-pointed star that we're going to see in some of the data. And the lion, of course, is the constellation Leo with the star Regulus in it from his message. So it does seem to be pointing to Ishtar. There's a really interesting group of researchers who have looked at a lot of gods and goddesses that are depicted in all cultures, and they've found that they seem to be a representation of parts of our brain, particularly the brainstem and the limbic system. And so I just wanted to show that. Here we see the statue of Ishtar on the far right, and the link between that statue and the human brainstem taken from a certain view. So depending on if you're cutting from the front of the brain or the back of the brain, or if you're looking from underneath, it's going to look slightly different. And the different looks actually map onto different gods, which is very weird as well. And so here you can see with the cerebellar lobes attached, you have these Venus goddesses sculptures that we see everywhere, with the huge hips, and then either the huge chest or the arms around her like that. And so you can see that these are the different lobes on the brainstem. And then when you see the brainstem with the cerebellar lobes removed, now we see the representation of Ishtar from Mesopotamia. And so it's a slightly different representation of the same goddess, and we can see that there does seem to be a correlation with the brainstem. I thought that was really interesting here. And so here are sculptures and depictions of all these different gods and goddesses. We have the Celtic gods, we have Peruvian gods, Italian, ancient Crete, ancient Greece, Mesopotamia, Turkey, Egypt, Bolivia, even. So even South America is using the exact same patterns. And all these Venus sculptures that we find all over the world as well, they all seem to have this exact same pattern. And it maps onto the brain structure. The brainstem that's bringing in all your nerve signals from your body, telling your brain what's going on, what are we touching, what's touching us. But then also the cranial nerves that tell our body, what are we smelling, what are we hearing. As remote viewers, we're always focused on that. What am I smelling? What am I tasting? What am I seeing? What am I feeling? But we're trying to get the data from the target, not from our actual environment. So it's interesting to me that all these gods and goddesses are mapping onto these exact parts of the brain that have to do with sensory input. So here we can see the yellow antenna-like stems coming out from the center of the brain. That's for your sense of smell. And you can see how it's represented in all these gods and goddesses. So in some, the part of the top of the brainstem that you can see on the far right here, the blue is either the blue eyes, and then the pink can be the pecs or the chest if it's a goddess, or the under eye bags of the very tired Celtic god. And so I thought that this was just an interesting opportunity to share a little bit about this data, because I do think it is relevant, and because he's referencing this lady, but he's specifically tying her to Ishtar and the bull of heaven by how he's describing it, by talking about the transparent bull, so the constellation bull, which is Taurus. So I thought, let's look at that a little bit. For the viewers here, this might be new information. I'd love some feedback on what do you think of this. I know it's not necessarily as related to the target, but it's a little bit of an aside that I just thought I would sneak in. Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting how you put it here. Yeah, it's amazing, all these things which overlap. It's very nice to see this, and then the link to the bull of Ishtar. Yes, I heard this afternoon on YouTube this interview, and then he told indeed this guy that he saw the bull also next to the lady, and she came from a vortex or something like that. Very interesting.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that is interesting. And just to say, the initial linking of the brain to the gods and goddesses of Egypt, that was done by researchers I'm going to show you in a quick moment. But then I went through and I found all these representations of all these gods that are holding the two things, and just it's just once you see it, it's hard to unsee it. And once you see it here, you start seeing it in a lot of other places. So it's an interesting pattern, maybe for some people.
Yeah, sure.
And so here is a YouTube channel if people are interested, and the website magicalegypt.com. We're not affiliated with them in any way. I just think it's a fascinating avenue of research that they're doing. You can see here, so the cranial nerves that come out of the midsection of the pons of the brainstem, it looks like little hands. And so then that maps on to these other goddess sculptures. And underneath, if you cut open that package at the top that the arms are coming out of, there are these globules. And so it's a nice little link there that they're showing. Moving on, back to our data. Thank you for that little aside, for the patience. So let's look at the alignment. One of the things, Claudia, you did really well here. You had the interpretation of, a product or something going to market on your timeline. But as an analyst, that's okay, because I can see underneath the data pattern that matters. And so if the overlay is a little bit off, that doesn't matter when you're remote viewing with an analyst, because the data is still there, the pattern is still there. And it was interesting to me that you have the date of success, or the date that it goes out, in 2027, because although Chris Bledsoe has said he believes that this big event is happening in Easter of 2026, he's also opened up the possibility that it might happen in April of 2027 or October of 2027. So the dates haven't quite been pinned down yet. So good job on that, Claudia. Yeah.
That's very interesting to see how you link this to that. Yeah, very, very good. Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Yeah. And so a little bit about the broader implications before we jump into the hardcore data. Basically, this story has captured the attention of US intelligence officials, religious scholars, ufologists, paranormal researchers, remote viewers, the entire community of conspiracy theory YouTube content creators online. Not just because he does seem to be able to get groups together and he brings them to the shore, and UFOs do seem to appear. But also because he seems to be having experiences that map onto a pattern of phenomena that people are interested in. He does believe that he was chosen, that he has a spiritual duty, that he has to tell people that something's coming, that's his sacred duty. That's another part of the pattern that seems to be similar with these kinds of experiences. You're the chosen one. We're giving you special information. Some of it is secret, and you have to share this with the world. Tell the world that there's a change coming and that they have to prepare. And so, again, here's just a little bit of information. So there's these overlays of these different archetypes that we could apply here. Now, I'm saying this as an analyst, so I'm not saying I don't believe that he's had this experience. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying that the experience isn't valid because it fits into a pattern. Just because something fits into a pattern, that doesn't mean it's not what you think it is. It just means that there's something maybe even more interesting going on under the surface. And so I did want to make that clear. Okay. So Cody, let's start with you, because I tasked you and then I gave you a retask, and I thought it was really good here that you started out with this person that's looking upwards into the sky to observe. So I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about how that felt when the data was coming through.
Yeah, that was just a really strong AI, but yeah, I just felt like I wanted to do it. I don't know if I really explored it afterwards, but it just felt like they were looking up. And yeah, I didn't really pay too much attention because I think that was like my second or third page.
Yes.
And then I think when I resumed, I totally forgot about it because I won't look over what I've gotten before
Yeah.
until I'm finished.
What's interesting is, and there may be no correlation, but I just think it's interesting, is the head looks like Easter Island head. Even sort of the angle looks similar to this angle that you'd see the heads on Easter Island.
That's a
Yeah,
really good
I
point.
did another sketch in me
Yeah.
retast that was similar. I noticed afterwards after I'd finished.
And I say
Yes.
that
Similar
also
looking
because
version.
you mentioned the timing of Easter. I don't know if there's any
Yeah, right.
relationship to that, but
Yeah, there is. And so I did actually bring in photos of the Moai on Easter Island, because I thought the same as David. I thought that that was an interesting little link there. So yeah, thank you, David. That was a good insight. And then here, Cody, I think you did really well for this one for really summarizing the target. You have this man who's looking up at the sky, who's looking over his shoulder, who's seeing something. And then here, and I love this, you have a lion in a cage. So he's trapped. So again, we have Leo, and he's moving along the sky, right? And the pole star is in the center. And so he's a trapped lion, and something's going to happen. And this whole event, the lady coming and talking to Chris, she's talking about something that's going to happen. And I think that we might have deciphered or decoded with your data. And so we'll talk about that as we go and get your opinions on it. But I just thought that this was really, really good data. So did you want to say anything about this?
Yeah, that was probably the part of my session that I thought was way off because my ideogram for animal doesn't come up very often, and when it does, it's normally not right. So I just quickly drew it and got away from it.
I thought that was amazing. I saw that and I was like, oh, there's Leo, the constellation. That's fantastic. And I did a session where I had the zodiac was coming through. And it came through to me as I could hear the animals in their stalls, and they're all penned in. They were all trapped in each one in their own little box. And so when I saw your data, you were describing it using the exact same kind of, I don't know, feel as it had for me. So I thought that was really cool. So I really liked seeing that data. And then we come to
If
Chris.
you deconstruct the whole picture of the lion in the cage, you have the Leo constellation and all the bars. If you remove the aspect of prison, is the shape of constellations being linked, the different stars being linked together.
Oh, yes, very good point. Yes, yes, the bars, the linking stars, definitely.
In the constellation of Leo.
Yes. That brings us to your data, Chris. So, Chris, you had a 4 that kept coming through, and it's funny the way you drew it because
A
you
weird
actually
4, yeah.
drew the constellation exactly. So, tell us about that.
Yeah, so that shape kept coming in. So the image I had was kind of like a sailing boat cloth, but in the shape of a 4. So it was just with a crook at the bottom. So that was weird. I tried to get away from the sailboat thingy. But yeah, that kept coming back, and then I had some kind of weird visual, which is next to this, and then I had this idea of a skeleton, like rests of skeleton. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but it could also be, again, those lines, the shapes of things being linked together.
Yes, I think that the stars are the skeleton of the constellation, and then we link them, we clothe them with this imagery, right? We wrap them in the concept of Leo, and it's a lion. And so I think, and I mentioned this on John's data about seeing the fabric, seeing the cotton, and so when I saw it in your session, I thought that was an interesting little link there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jeff, who isn't here, but Jeff, if you're in the audience and you want to join us, if the link isn't working or whatever it is, let us know in the chat. So Jeff has the Star of Woman and this idea of calling a meeting to order, or a group maybe reciting some kind of an oath in a dark room. And so again, this brings us back to Ishtar and the goddess of the spring equinox, and goddesses that are associated with stars. And this lady goddess that Chris Bledsoe describes, telling him about the star alignment is significant. And so just really nice data from Jeff there. And then here he gives us more. So he talks about the creative energy of the feminine, and Chris Bledsoe mentions that as well in his book. He really puts that emphasis on, oh, this, the lady has come and she has this feminine energy, and that's what the shift is happening. It's kind of about that. And so just very good. He had the Order of the Eastern Star. And again, we're talking about Regulus that's rising in the east. And very, very good data here from Jeff. Observance of the Great Light. And this idea, and we're going to see this kind of starts opening up the actual meaning of the data here, I think, today for this particular interpretation. The idea of a candle being passed between generations. So keep that in mind as a visual image as we move through the next few slides. Here's a Reddit post I found when I was doing my research on some of the data, where someone's saying that Regulus, what part of the message was that Regulus rising due east at dawn and aligning with the gaze of the Sphinx, that would usher in a new age. And so there are, this was 2 years ago. And so they were trying to figure out, when is the new age coming? Is it coming in December 2023 or February 2024 or April 2025? So obviously the first 2 dates are out because they have come and gone. Nothing happened. But and then April has also now come and gone. So now Chris is saying maybe April 2026. I think Claudia's data suggests that if it's something that's going to happen in the span of a year or a day or a month, it might be 2027. So you have a little bit of time to stock up on bottled water, I guess. This brings us back to the royal stars that I talked about a few minutes ago, the 4 stars in the different constellations. So Aquarius is located between the great star or square of Pegasus and Capricorn the goat. So as we go through, we're going to find out why this is so important, why Aquarius is so important, but we're actually stepping into the new era, the new age of Aquarius, based on what's happening with our zodiac. And so one of the markers for that is the great square of Pegasus. So here's a little bit of information about that. And funnily enough, Chris, you drew the constellation of Pegasus. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that too? Because I thought it was phenomenal that on the same page where you drew the constellation of Leo, you also drew the constellation of Pegasus.
Yeah, that's funny. After you gave me feedback, I thought maybe it was linked to Orion as well, because the shape, at least in the bottom, is a bit similar, but it looks a bit like Pegasus is probably a better match.
Yes.
But yeah, it does make sense. Like I was saying, the kind of AOL of skeleton, I didn't really see a skeleton, and so I wrote, it reminds me of the rest of a skeleton. So it was really like weird shapes coming together. So it does make sense that it would be a constellation of some type.
And there was a lot of data that I couldn't fit into the Egyptian Isis, Orion, Horus overlay for analysis. But I thought, you know what? I think a lot of people can easily put that together, and I'm not convinced that that's correct. So I thought we'll leave that to other groups, and we're going to focus on alternative interpretations that I think are maybe more strongly supported by the data. But I did see definitely there's the Egyptian stuff there. You could interpret some of the things as Osiris, definitely as Orion. Here, John, you're also talking to us about constellations. You have the stars linked by lines. And here again, really, really nice data. You have Pegasus, very similar to Chris's, and there's a snake made of gold above. And when we find Pegasus in the star, above him we see Lacerta, who looks a little bit like the snake. This could also fit onto Ophiuchus. But I think for now, this is the more useful data. What do you think about that?
I think I didn't expect it to be relevant to that, but that's how a lot of my data is. So yeah, that's interesting. Those were pretty strong visuals that I had, so I figured they meant something, but yeah, I had no idea.
And even you have the idea of like connecting wires, right? So the lines that are connecting the stars. So I thought that was a really beautiful sketch of the sky. And again, for the audience, this is completely blind. The only thing the remote viewers were given is a code of 8 numbers and letters. That's it. They didn't get any idea of what it was, what category of target. They didn't know what kind of target it might be. I try as hard as I can to be a little bit unexpected, so my targets should be a little bit unpredictable. And so to see people coming in and all these sessions that are drawing constellations that are relevant to this target, I just thought that was amazing. And so I do see that being Pegasus right there. And I think that's a really good image of it with Lacerda in the sky above. So great work on that.
Yeah, I find that to be quite interesting as well. Very nice.
It's fascinating, hey?
Yeah, the wording here, as if connecting wires to Zappit, is really strong to the idea of the constellations.
Yes. Yeah, great work. And then here, this is, I think, for me, the clincher. You had, in relation to this, so we can see here Pegasus and the outstretched lines. And again, you have the 3 there, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. And then you have the birds that seem to be released, but they belong to or have to return home to it. And I really think that that's Cygnus. So right here, you can see the Cygnus constellation, the swan. And I think that that's the bird because you did have this in a few places in your session about the birds and they're wanting to release, they're wanting to fly away in the sky. So I thought that was brilliant. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of see it. That perception was pretty strong, but I had no idea what it meant. But yeah, that definitely strikes a resemblance.
And that's something for the audience that we talked about before we went live today. I was talking about how very often we see visual data and we're so convinced that it has to be what we saw. Sometimes it's not. It's a metaphor. It's a symbol. In this case, in this instance, John, you see this something, you see birds flying off, but they're not real birds. They're a constellation. And so I think that you can get amazing data and look at the analysis and figure out what does it mean. So great data there. And then here's where, I start putting these things together and I start seeing information about a pole star changing. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the process, how that happens. It's this cyclical thing. It's a 26,000 year cycle. And the pole star, once upon a time, it was Tuban that was in a different constellation. Right now, our pole star, we call it Polaris, which means pole star. But when it's not the pole star anymore, it'll have a different name. And Vega was one of the pole stars, and we'll talk about what the next one will be in a few slides. And so I'm looking at your data in relation to that. And as we work through the slides, we'll see why that's the interpretation that best fits the group data. But I really think it was interesting to me just to see one thing that you kept seeing, John, was falling from the stars falling from the sky. And I'm not sure what to make of that in light of it being a warning or a message. But some of it might just be that as the pole star moves, the whole dome of the sky appears to shift, right? So all the constellations appear to shift on their cycle. So I'm hoping it's just that. Did you want to say something about some of the data that I have here showing?
No, not. I mean, I wouldn't know where to start. Yeah, not yet. Let's say that.
Not yet. Yeah, I do want to mention you have a spinning top, and we're going to come back to that when we look at some of Claudia's data, and the life forms that are scattering, moving abruptly. I want you to hold the idea in your mind that, like we saw with Cody's data, those life forms, those animals might be constellations. And so I think that's how we can interpret these things. The golden doors that open, that can be the progression of one age to another, because it's often described as the solar gates, and the sun goes through a different gate when it starts rising in Aquarius. But we'll get more data and then you can jump in. Another star that's important in this whole story is Auriga, is the constellation. Um, it's known as the charioteer. And Cody, you had this hexagonal shape where you felt like the shape was really important. And I do think, looking at all your data, I think you're describing the charioteer Auriga. And so that was an amazing sketch that you have. And you had the sense that it feels like transport. And in a coming slide, we'll talk more about that. But I just wanted to give you a gold star for that as well. So everyone's drawing the constellations. And the fact that you picked up on the transport aspect is it works on two levels. So one, the name of the constellation means transport. It means charioteer, but also you're transporting the sky from one pole star to another pole star. So I think it works on two levels there. And then you also had the sense, you tried to kind of look closer at this thing, this hexagonal thing. You got the sense of it being like an eye. And we'll see a little bit later how that fits and works with pointing out. So here's Auriga, and you can see there's Mars in Leo constellation. So all the constellations, all this data seems to be about how the stars are shifting in their natural cycles for the new age of Aquarius, which is just a zodiacal event. It's an event that happens regularly. So it's interesting that there's this hype about this lady saying there's something that's going to happen. I think we need to kind of think, what does that tell us about what's going to be the effects of all of this? So Chris, talking about multiple layers of meaning, I wanted to point this out as well for the audience. When you do analysis, you can find so many different layers of meaning and data. And most of the time it's all valid and it works at different levels of complexity, or, some of it is literal, some of it is symbolic. And so for Chris, you kept mentioning the number 4 was coming through really intensely. And I thought that was interesting. Regulus it's a quadruple star system. So it's actually composed of 4 stars. So I think that it's nice that you had the number 4 for the 4 stars of Regulus, and you also drew it in a way that exactly mirrors the constellation of Leo. Also, I assigned you, so for the audience that doesn't know this, we worked a lotto target this week. Just to try it out, just to play, I gave the participating live stream regulars a target to get a number for the lotto, and I gave each of them a position for the winning numbers. And I gave Chris the 4th position to get the 4th winning number. And so I thought that was a funny little synchronicity there. And also Easter 2026, which is the date that Chris Bledsoe believes this event might be taking place, is the 4th month. And then Regulus is one of the 4 royal stars of ancient Persia, a guardian or watcher of the heavens. So again, just a lot of nice little synchronicities there with your data. Here,
Cool.
John and Jeff. Or yeah, did you want to say something about that, Chris?
No, I said that's cool. It's a bit of synchronicity and displacement.
Yeah, and when I first got back to you, I just said, here's a correlation with the lotto thing, and laughed at that. I wanted it to be a little bit of surprise of like all these 4s in the data. I thought that was really fun. Because Jeff isn't with us, but he did an amazing job at getting a summary of the target as well. He has this intersection that you can tell is the zodiac. He calls it an intersection. He even draws it in the way that a lot of the old zodiac symbols are drawn. And John, you have the stairway to heaven, and that is often the symbol for the zodiac, and for when you're in the middle of an age. And you have that sense of the rotation like a clock. So this aspect of timing, which is also good data. And so just a little bit of information here for people. The changing of the ages of the zodiac, it's the precession of the equinoxes. So you hear a lot about this. I think maybe it's Graham Hancock or Eric Van Daniken. One of them wrote books that really talked a lot about the precession of the equinoxes and how that was represented in all these ancient cultures. And they seem to be very interested in this. And the number 72 was sacred in all these different cultures because every 72 years, the sky moves 1 degree in terms of the zodiacal ages that we're in. And so it's a 2,160 year period in which the position of the sun at the spring equinox slowly shifts through each zodiac constellation. And so each is considered an age. Right now, we're coming out of the age of Pisces and we're moving into the age of Aquarius. It's really interesting because when we look at the different ages, even though it shouldn't happen, it does. It seems that the dominant religion at the time of that age maps onto the constellation of that age. So we're coming out of Pisces, and Jesus, Christianity, is a symbol of the fish. Before that, it was Aries, the ram. And if you look at Judaism, there's a lot of ram symbology, imagery. There's the ram's horn that's blown at certain rituals and festivals or significant events. It's very odd. We look at ancient Egypt and we see that it was in the age of Leo, the constellation Leo, and so we have all these sphinxes. There's definitely some weird patterns. So then it brings us to ask, what's going to happen in the age of Aquarius? Aquarius is the bearer of the water, and he pours the water out. So yeah, so I think that there's something there to think about for people. And John, you had this Jesus reaching out on the cross, and I don't know if people have seen the movie Zeitgeist, but I remember that was one movie. I think it was the first time I was exposed to that idea of Jesus on the cross being a symbol of the zodiac. So did you want to say a few things about this, John?
Well, that was a really unique perception with the Jesus one. It was almost like crosses pop up in my sessions a lot, and maybe that's just from my background, but oftentimes it'll shift into something else. But I saw a cross, and then I remember I had this type of perception before, but he was on the cross, and it was almost like his spirit was coming out of his body kind of toward me. And that was just kind of mind blowing to see that. But I don't know what the subject covering one eye was. But the tree one was interesting too, because I kept getting this idea of like a ramp, kind of like maybe the stairway to heaven type of thing too. I'm not sure what that was, but I got that a lot too.
Well, I couldn't find the imagery for it, but I do remember learning, and I think this is part of the Zeitgeist movie lore, but I think it was the Mayans, and they talked about the crossing of the galactic rift when the sun rises in that particular area. That happened in 2012. There's an alignment with the galactic center that it makes a cross, and so they called that the tree or the cross. And so the tree seems to be interchangeable with the idea of the cross. And then Jesus being sacrificed on the cross. So the idea of the sun dying on the cross. So that ties into celestial events as well. Chris Bledsoe is Christian. So I think he is going to also have that angle in his interpretation of his experiences. And so that could be, you might be picking up on that as well. And like I said before, when I'm tasking, when I'm doing analysis, I do try to stay as neutral as possible. So especially for the audience, don't get pissed off if you think that I don't believe in Jesus. Don't get pissed off if you think that I do believe in Jesus. I believe in the data that I'm presenting, and I'm just exploring the different ways that we can make meaning from it to try to understand the underlying pattern of information. But I did think that was good data. Yeah.
Is there any connection between the Stairway to Heaven and the Tree of Life? I don't know if there is. It's just so it just occurred to me that maybe the tree represents the Tree of Life, but it may not.
I think I think it definitely.
Yeah, someone with a name I can't pronounce basically mentioned that Aquarius has poured water or knowledge, that kind of thing. in the
Oh,
comments.
that's a nice fit for John's data about the books of knowledge, all this knowledge being given out. Or yeah, that's a great. Thank you in chat. We appreciate that insight.
Yeah, I know there's also like Jacob's ladder from like the Bible too, and some type of connections with like spiritual energy coming in, or some people even think of connections with like DNA as well too, like turning on certain DNA that allows us to receive certain signals or something.
Yes, definitely.
And the
And
poured water, I wasn't familiar with that, but I had at least 3 different perceptions in my data on water pouring too. So that makes some
yes,
sense.
yeah,
And
the
actually,
poured
one of them, I was like drinking on my side, like drinking from the pouring water. Actually, I think in one of them.
Yes, and I didn't include that in the slides that I should have. So for the audience, I do my best to include as much data as possible into the slides, but there's some stuff where, you know, I can't have 800 slides. So some stuff does get left out. But yes, yeah, I should have included that as a signal for Aquarius, the water bearer, right? So that was really good data. The Freemasons have the ladder going up to the 3 stars, and there's again the Freemason imagery, like remote viewing data, should be interpreted on more than one level of analysis and meaning, and one of them is celestial. So yeah, that's a good point, Michael. Oh, let me make sure I'm sharing again. There we go. If you have questions in chat, feel free to put them in, and we'll do our best to address them. And so here we have, okay, so we have, I talked about the 4 royal stars, and Formalhaut was one of them. And Antares is the other one. And they form a line across from horizon to horizon. So when you look at dawn when the sun is rising, and when you look at dusk when the sun is setting, these are the stars that are rising on the same day. And so I'm wondering, John, your man holding these parallel bars. I'm wondering if it has to do with that, this idea of like trying to figure out the zodiacal lines, and it ties back to what Chris was saying about the lion being caged by the bars. So we could link it to the parallel bars being the bars between the stars that we make constellations out of. So that's just something to think about as we move forward in the data. I wish that Jeff was here to talk about this. This is a little bit controversial, and I hope I don't get pinged by YouTube for this.
Well, speaking of Jeff.
Speak of Jeff, and Jeff appears. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
I was just saying, I wished you were here because this is a controversial image to show, but I want people to see that it has to do with stars and their motion in the sky, because we're talking about star alignments and how they tie into Regulus and the lady's message. And so you had this in your data. The Big Dipper has been used, especially in Vedic astrology, as a pointer to other stars. It is the origin of the symbol that we shall not name, but it did mean different things when it was used by different cultures. And so in Indian astronomy, it was a celestial compass for navigation. It was used to determine seasons. It was used as a kind of calendar. And so I thought it was really interesting. And it's used to point to Polaris. That's how you find the North Pole, pole star. And so I thought that was really nice data representation, Jeff. And then you had the sense of a tunnel. And I see this, and we'll see it in other people's data, as a tunnel between the Big Dipper and the pole star. And I don't know if you saw, Jeff, but we covered this, your beautiful summary here of the zodiac and the intersection. Do you want to say anything about any of this, Jeff, to catch us up a little bit?
Well, I'll just catch you up and just say, sorry I'm late. I've had 10 very intense days out of the last 11, and I just passed out. I just got up from a nap. So here I am.
We're glad to have you.
So I looked at the reveal early this morning. I'm a bit confused about the zodiac connections from the little bit of research I did, but the star, the light, and feminine energy definitely came up in my work. So I'm not sure what you've discussed so far.
Yeah, we did discuss a little bit the Eastern Star and the Regulus rising in the east, and the gaze of the Sphinx on it is it's supposed to predict a shift to a new age that was told to Chris Bledsoe by the lady. We've tied the lady to Ishtar, and so the Eastern Star and the Freemasonry group, the Women of the Eastern Star, that does kind of fit the data pattern. So she's talking about a new age that's coming, a shift for humans they need to get prepared for. This is why she's telling Chris this message. She's talking about star alignments and their significance. And the data all put together is telling a story about the pole star change. And so we're going to explore it as we go. You haven't missed too much yet. So.
Okay.
So, where were we? Oh, yeah. So here, Claudia, you also have the tunnel a lot like Jeff's tunnel. And again, I think it does match as this idea of it's something that's guiding you from an indicator star to the pole star. Did you want to say something a little bit about this in the sense of this particular interpretation, Claudia?
Well, it did not feel as a real tunnel. It was more like an airy vortex, like everything was turning and twisting. And but I had the idea, like I did not mention this, but it's like a wormhole. If you went in, then you came out somewhere else. That's what's the idea.
And we're going to see that actually someone else had the wormhole, but instead of putting it here, I put it at the very end of the slide deck. So
I did not mention it, but now that's the right word. What I felt when I went in and I came out at the other side. Yeah, like a time jump I mentioned. Yeah.
And so you can see here in the slide. So this, oh no, you can't. I can't change it. This circle here that you're seeing, I don't know if you can make this out, but right here is our current pole star. So this is the year 2000, and we have Polaris, which is part of the Big Dipper here. You can see. Is it the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper? And then the pole star changes. So 2,000 years ago, it was here. There wasn't a pole star. 4,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago. When you go around, you can see. So about 8,000 years ago, they had a lot of stars in the center of their sky that all the other stars seemed to be rotating around. You can see here there was a star that was right in the center of the sky. Everything else was rotating on that pinpoint. And then in between, though, there's like in this era, there isn't really a star that's close to the center. So it's harder for navigation. It's harder for maritime, for sailors, things like that. And so this is just, I don't know how familiar people are with this kind of thing. But yeah, it's just a natural cycle. So I think you were kind of talking about that, Claudia, that idea of like twisting and tumbling and turning. And we're going to see it in other people's as well. And here you have the wheel, and you have this spin around an axe or an axle or an axis. And so again, I think that ties in really well with this idea. Does that make sense to you a little bit?
Yeah, I really had a wheel, but later on I thought maybe this is then a star. But yeah, it was tumbling and
yes,
twisting, all kinds of
motion.
Yeah, that's the right word. Yes.
Yeah, and we see it here again. So John, this is your spinning top again that we saw earlier in the context of Claudia's data. So it starts to make a little bit more sense as we move forward. So for people to kind of understand, this is what our sky looked like where I am-ish this morning at 7:20. You can see in the center of the sky, we have the pole star in Ursa Minor. And in 1,000 years, this is what people will be seeing. They won't see a star in the dead center of the sky around which every other star seems to be rotating, because the stars will have shifted. So there's like a sliding sideways of the whole sky, the dome of our sky, let's say. And so this is what you see now. This is what you'll see in 1,000 years. And every 1,000 years, it changes more and more and more. The next star that we'll see in the center of our sky will be Cepheus, and it'll be this star right here. And we're going to see some data pointing that out. So Jeff, I think this was amazing little drawing of Draco. So Draco is a constellation that sits in the middle and guards over the changing of the pole stars. And you have him caught in the act. And you had this idea here, exothermic structure. I saw that as the stars. So I thought, again, here we have Jeff drawing the constellation. So Jeff, I don't know if you saw this, but everybody's drawing constellations today. We've seen Leo, we've seen Auriga, and a number of others. And then here, so I do wonder, the data seems to be pointing to the main message having to do with the change of the zodiacal age, the death of the old pole star, and the birth of the new pole star. And so I do think, but feel free to tell me differently, Jeff, but I feel as though some of your data here could be interpreted, not that it necessarily means this and only this, but I can kind of see it as the death of the pole star. You have these 3 flower beds here, or pots. We're going to see this in Claudia's data come up a lot, the idea of the 3 related to this main pole star change. And so I kind of thought that all these groups of people, I see them as constellations. And I think that that's an interesting interpretation. You could see the casket as having to do with the 3 stars of Orion, but I don't think that in the context of the broader data set, I don't think it matches as well. So what are your thoughts?
So when I'm doing a session, I sometimes will do a site sketch, sometimes I will not. This time I was excited to do a site sketch. I was like, this encompasses the target. It is a casket with no body in it. It is the death of something, but not a person. It is something ending and something being, in a sense, mourned, but then something new is replacing it. That is exactly how it came to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm glad to hear that, because in my analysis, that is how I saw it. I really did see like, oh, he's just drawn the target. He's drawn the pole shift dying. He's drawn all the constellations around it. I'm going to want you guys to opine, to think about which 3 stars are being referred to, because we're going to see it in other people's data, especially Claudia's. But here it's really clear, right? You have the 3 boxes of flowers. And the 2 guardian stars on the side. And the 2 guardian stars on the side, even that, it kind of brings us back to the Ishtar goddess symbolism that, Jeff, you weren't here when we covered it. So I'll just show it to you really quickly. This stuff here. So all these gods and goddesses that appear to be depictions of the brainstem. And yeah. And so it's always the god or goddess, and they're flanked on both sides by guardians or by protector animals or by power sticks. There's always something. And it looks like those are the, excuse me, those are the parts of the brain, the parts of the brain, the process smell, the olfactory tract. So yeah, so we talked about that earlier. And so I think that fits.
It's really cool data, Jeff. And I like that you're able to pick up on that through your session work, meaning in real time you kind of understood, like S3 is like, hey, this is really important. You kind of like parts of you understood how to put it all together.
It doesn't happen often. When it does, it seems like it's meaningful. So I'm proud of this one.
I've noticed that in your work, Jeff. When you give a site sketch, it's usually really on target. It's a really good overview of the target. Yeah, that's definitely one of your strengths as a remote viewer. So here we get to Claudia's data, and in the same way so something to look at here. So here we have Ursa Minor, right? So here's our pole star right now. And then this is going to be the new pole star. So we're moving the sky. The whole sky is going to shift. It's going to appear to shift. And so then the motion, the rotation of all of the constellations or zodiac are going to appear to be rotating around this star at the tip of Cepheus. And so that's the information. And here's how it comes through in different people's data. So Claudia, everything here, you always have the 6 wheels, the 3 on each side. So that's a pattern that I see. You're talking about these military, but I don't think it's the military aspect that's necessarily as important. I think it's more the idea of transportation in a rigid, fixed kind of system. So do you want to tell us a little bit about some of your data here that I'm showing on the page? Oh, also the idea of testing. They're testing it. We're going to see that come again and again, this idea of the military running tests. And so, oh, there's some little reveals that are coming up. But first, let's hear from Claudia.
Well, at first I thought, well, I'm far off, but it's very interesting that you bring up the issue of the transport from yeah. This is so. If I see it like this, it's really rather rigid. It was a rather a square thing, but the 3 wheels at each side were special, were solid and flexible. So how can I link this? But I find it difficult, but
well, there's more to come, so we'll see how it links up in other people's data as well.
yeah, it's a new, well, it's enter a new age, so
Yes.
it has to do with this movement, the movement
Yes.
we are going to make.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what I mentioned more. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so here
Also-
you can, yeah, go ahead, David.
Also, the trees on each side, right? Because you were talking about, they usually have
Yes.
these representation of the gods. Usually have these 2 things on each side.
That's
one on
right.
each
The
side.
guardians are, yes, the olfactory, definitely. Yeah, very good catch.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mhm. And the 3 cut trees, so I can't remember right now who it was. Someone else had all the cut trees. It might have been John. So here we're moving forward with your data, Claudia. So again, you're seeing it as a machine, and you're describing the copper and the metal. And it's, I also did that in a target that I had a couple years ago, where I was describing this thing and I was like, oh, what kind of metal is this? And is this glass? And what color is it? And I was describing, it was the sky. And it was something similar. It was a pole shift, but it wasn't in my most recent one. This was one that I had done when I was working under Glenn for HRVG. But I remember, like, I spent so much time trying to figure out, and like this model, it was a model of something, and it was completely conceptual data, and it was.
Well, I saw a lot of wheels. Yeah, I mentioned a lot of wheels, but now I realize these are all stars. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So, yeah, exactly. And you can see here, so there's the zodiacs, the constellations, and they rotate. Where the sun rises is a little bit different every morning against the backdrop of stars. And over 72 years, the backdrop of the sun, the stars that are behind the sun have shifted 1 degree. Over 26,000 years, the sun rises in every different constellation, and then it comes back to the original starting point. And so you have it as a machine, but I can see this as the pole star, and this is the sky that's all the stars that are rotating around it. And it feels like a machine, and that's okay. That's not bad data. It's good data. And then here, this is an explanation of the tilt and why the pole stars change. So it's attributed to the tilt of the Earth, and there are different models that explain this differently, but the most mainstream one, the Earth's axis is tilted and the Earth is spinning, and as it spins, it's also wobbling. And so right now, the axis of the Earth points to Polaris, but in thousands of years, the wobble will mean that the axis of the Earth will point to a different star. So that's what's happening here. That's what you're kind of describing. And so I thought it was good data. Yeah. And even, the idea of a cylinder, and I think we see it in the next couple of slides, that the zodiac constellations in this model, it's presented as a cylinder around the sun, right? That spins around the sun. And so that's good. And the idea of a patent, it's a pattern that's set, that's fixed, right? That's recognized. So really good data here. And here again, it's still being interpreted as a machine, but that's okay because it is a bit of a machine, right? The skies, the motion of the stars in our sky, it's very machine-like, right? And so I think this is really good data. You have the 3 stars, always the 3 stars. We're going to see this everywhere. And the tube, the tunnel that we were talking about earlier. And then the spinning wheel, so that rotation is coming through. And then here's a little bit of information for everyone about the precession of the equinoxes, that they can be visualized as a cylinder because the Earth's axis of rotation traces out a cone shape in space, according to this model. And so, yeah. And so does that make sense to you, Claudia? Does that sound like a good interpretation?
Yes, surely it makes sense. And I also saw these. I saw these pipes, and I saw this also. I think in John's work, he mentioned also something about pipes.
Yeah.
Something, parallel pipes or something like that. When I saw his work, I thought, I had also something with pipes. Yeah.
And we're going to see more about your frequency pipes. There's a link with John as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then here we're seeing John, upward, windy, spiraling path. You have, like David said, the tree of life. You have this tree-like thing, and it's rotating. Claudia has her machine with the pole star at the top and the rotation around it. And Patrick, who is not here today but will be in August, he also has basically he drew the feedback. And so again, he has the stars and the shifting of the axis. And so I just thought that was an amazing sketch. There's a number of you that seem to be drawing the feedback, and that was a weird experience for me. So there you go. And then Jeff, this was fantastic. Again, you summarized this one really well. Last one as well. You drew the rotation of the stars around the pole star. So the pole star would be here in the middle, and that's the rotation of the stars, the star trails. And then you drew the laser coming out into the sky. And so before I get your thoughts on that, I'm going to show you a little bit more information. So these are these observatories, but what's being done now is they're creating fake stars. They're creating what they call guide stars to create sharper images is the explanation, but we'll see that there's some secrets that are being kept by the US military. And so the mainstream story that they're saying is we're creating these fake stars in our atmosphere, in the sodium layer of our atmosphere, just so that we can take clearer pictures of the stars. So here's an example of the much clearer image that they can get when they use a guide star to focus their telescope. So they create a fake star with a laser in the sodium layer of the atmosphere, and then they get their telescope to focus on it, and now their telescope is all well focused and sharp. And now it can take pictures of the stars that are 450 light years away, 450 million light years away, and still be in focus. And so that's just fantastic technology. And here's a little bit about how it works to do the maybe more secret application that they're trying to draw attention away from. They tell us, oh, look, we're making stars. This is beautiful. What they're actually doing is they're trying to measure changes in the magnetic field of the Earth, in the strength of the geomagnetic field. And that's what they're using to do that. So they basically are sending modulated laser light into the sodium layer. And for all intents and purposes, it makes a fake star. Oh, look at the fake star. But that's not actually the reason why they're doing that. They're actually measuring the fluorescence of the molecules to see the impact of the magnetic field lines, and that it's very technical. Here's a nice little graph for people to look at. And we're going to see that graph in people's data as waves on the shore and other kind of things. And that kind of makes sense because these are waves in the upper atmosphere. And so here's a little article about Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. that that are actually doing this research, that they are operating this, and it's a Boeing-built sodium guide star laser on the telescope at the Kirkland Air Force Base. So this is Boeing-funded, Boeing-led research. So I thought that was really interesting. I wouldn't mind if, if anyone has any thoughts about this before we get into your data, showing all these fake stars in your data. Also, I just need to drink some water, so I just thought I'd give myself a few seconds while you guys chat a little bit.
Well, it's definitely interesting information. I wasn't aware of this at all. So I do find it to be interesting.
Thank you, David. It might be a little bit weird, but we're going to get there. We're going to bring everybody along. So, Michael, you did a fantastic job of describing these laser guides and these fake stars that they're making in the sodium layer of the atmosphere. You have these bright flashes, the stars. You have the lasers. You have their coherent light. Here is, like I said, so here we have the chart. So this is the magnetometry resonance at the sodium layer. I don't want to bore the audience too much more than I already have. So I'm not really going into detail. We're just looking at the pretty pictures right now. Look at the nice waves. And we see that as well in John's data as well. And John, this seems to make the flow and appears gold. Again, the sodium layer makes the sodium light fluoresces orange. And so I thought that was really good data for what's actually happening. And you have, something breaking or popping out as though it's spring-loaded, and it feels like pellets are falling from above. So again, I think that this is the star popping out from the sodium layer because the sodium molecules are being excited. And Michael, you had these two light emitting things in a couple different places in your session. So Michael, do you want to say a few things about this in the context of what we're talking about? Or
Yeah, sure. I did notice in some of Claudia's earlier work, she mentioned like pipes with like harmonic stuff moving through it, which made me think, oh, that kind of reminds me of like the coherency of like light beams, like in lasers and so on. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see that come up again. And yeah, the number 2 did come up a couple other times. One of the first pictures I drew was like a giant splash with these like particles kind of coming through, and it kind of made me think of some of the Aquarius related data as well. So it's kind of interesting how it's like seemingly kind of disjointed, but it's like somehow it's all kind of sort of grasping for the same thing as other people's work. So
yes, isn't that a strange thing, right? You kind of think of there's all these disparate elements and they all seem so weird, but yet they tie together in a way that I think is phenomenal. So I just thought you had really good data there in terms of explaining what this is and how it's working. You have the idea of the bright flash. And here, Michael, I thought that was really strong here. You're asking, like, what is this energy impulse for? And it's for signaling. And that's exactly what they're doing, right? And yeah, the idea of ionized particles that are being emitted, again, that's good data for what they're doing in the sodium layer. Yeah, so I just thought that this was really good data.
Yeah, I was thinking initially, I thought the bright flash could also just been like the star as well, like maybe like signaling some kind of change in like the Earth or knowledge or something. Because speaking to like a chain of sequence of events, basically, but it could be just like all different meanings kind of compressed there.
When I first did my slide deck, I interpreted these more as the stars and the constellations. Yeah. And when I got new data and I had to redo my slide deck, then I was like, oh, he's describing this. And that kind of changed how I understood your session. And then, so here we have the pole star changes basically from the surface of Earth. It looks like the sky is falling. It looks like the sky is shifting. And the center of rotation is going from one star to a different star. And we had a lot of data here from remote viewers talking about this powerful motion, and this is at an angle. Cody, you're talking about the angle, downhill motion, and you bring in the idea that it feels destructive. And we're going to explore that a little bit later on, but I just wanted to note that here. And Chris, you also had this. So if one of you guys wants to talk about how you saw this, how it felt for you, Chris, you have the circular motion, and I think we have that, on the next slide as well. Chris, again, you drew the feedback. You even have the colors, the yellow and the blue. And Patrick, he drew it as well. It's angled, and there's his earth in the center. Cody, you had it in a few places that you feel like you're tilted on an angle now. Yeah, so let us know how that felt.
On my side, I had that feeling of something being pulled down, and I had this idea of a pulley system because I had the idea of things being shifted with weird forces, and then I got the perception of orbits. So I thought it can be at the atom level or at the universe level, but I had this idea of this kind of shapes.
And I think that that's interesting because you can see the atoms as the stars, right, in the constellations as well.
Yeah.
Right? So you're talking about the stars, you're talking about the universe. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, and that's something that always fascinated me because since I was a kid, I've been thinking that it's so weird that what you learn with atoms, it's like exactly the same as the solar system, but like micro versus macro.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And what do you make of the fact that you chose the colors of the feedback image?
That's pretty funny because I actually thought what colors would fit well, and I thought yellow and blue.
You're gonna see that in a couple places, and
because here I really questioned myself. I thought I should put colors, and I thought to myself, what colors make sense here, and I just chose those intuitively.
If people are on YouTube, on Chris's channel, Chilio RV, you can see his session on the Dynapine star map. And there as well, Chris, you use the color brilliantly in terms of letting your psi ability help you choose which color to use. And it matched the data, the target. It was fantastic. It was really, really nice to see. So you do seem to have a good skill at that.
Probably unrelated, but I just find it interesting because you had mentioned the color of gold, with the layer of the, what was it, the sodium, right? So if just because the stars could be represented as the blue line and the sodium layer could be represented as the yellow.
Yes.
Not saying that's true. It's just another layer of information that I see.
I love it. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I did end up. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I also did end up getting the data atomic nuclei as well at a certain point.
Yes.
And it was this related to like the giant splash kind of coming down too. So I think it was also trying to communicate with the stars as well. In my own head, just the atoms, like the protons and neutrons, were like red and blue. So it's slightly different there.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really good correspondence between the data, definitely. And then here, Cody. So now, Cody, you're talking to us about Earth compass navigation. And so again, you're seeing a small globe. So you're seeing the small globe in the feedback image about the wobble, the changing equinoxes, and that sense of navigation, the pole star. So very nicely done there. And then here we have two layers of interpretation. We can see these two stars as being the two stars of Pegasus. And that was my initial interpretation because, Chris, you have your 4 here, which is we've looked at as the constellation of Leo, where Regulus lives. And we also saw on that same page you had the constellation of Pegasus. And so when you are exploring this a little bit further, to me, I think it's a good match for the stars of Pegasus. So you'd see these stars here, right? This shape. But it also can tie in. And Michael, your 2 stars and the shape of your laser, at first I thought that could be referring to something similar, but now I think it makes more sense to interpret Michael's data as the sodium layer stars, and Chris, yours as the Pegasus. You are talking about 2 round lights, so it could be the stars. And again, you're talking about some sort of a machine. Did you want to say something about this, or what do you think?
I don't know too much about the story, but I kind of saw this as potentially also being the orbs that the guy keeps saying he's interacting with and can summon, or
Yes.
something like that. So I thought maybe there is something behind those orbs that we don't see that could fit into this thing, because I had a weird feeling here, and I never have that kind of feeling. So I put that I'm seeing a kind of machine here with these 2 shiny stuff that goes into the earth, and stuff about research extracting minerals and rare minerals. And then I had a weird feeling. I was like, is this Earth? Because it feels like it's on another planet, and I don't put that kind of stuff in my sessions normally. That was a
Yeah.
weird feeling.
Yes, I think if I had seen more data about other planet exploration, or other, alien life forms, or travel in spaceships, I think I might have taken that interpretation for this data. But because when I look at the whole set of data, I didn't really see that coming through. So I looked at other ways that we could make sense, that we could find meaning here.
Well,
Yeah.
Sasha, just out of curiosity, because of what Chris brought up about the orbs, and does are the laser beams that shoot into this sodium layer, are they visible with the naked eye? Would they appear as orbs? Could you
Yeah.
move the laser through the field and make it look like a moving orb? I'm just curious.
Yes. Yes, you could. Yes, you could. You could. So because you don't see the laser from the side in the photos, they make it so that you can, oh, look, there's a golden light coming up. But when a laser is a good laser, then the light should be coherent, and it should be collimated, and it's going in one direction. So you shouldn't have a lot of photons going off sideways. And so what you see is you see stars. You see stars that are fake, but they look real. And so, yeah, if they can make them in the sodium layer, they could definitely make them move around up there. Definitely. That would be no problem. They just move the laser. That's a really good insight, David. Yeah. So we're not, again, for the audience, we're not saying it's real or fake. We're not taking a position, but we are exploring the data and having fun playfully exploring the data without having to take a belief either way. We can just have fun exploring. And Cody, you're talking here about this repetitive motion, and Claudia is talking about the new era. So how did you experience that, Cody, in terms of all of this data? If you wanted to say a few things.
Yeah, the way that came through, it, at the end of my session, it kind of felt like a journey. I'm giving someone a gift, but it seemed like they came over water, so that felt kind of like a swell would feel.
Yep, that makes sense. Yes. And so you have this idea of something, maybe there's danger here. And it's interesting because you have both the idea of it being sudden, but also that it feels expected. And I'm trying to tie this into Chris Bledsoe's message from the lady, right? Because that's the target, is what is this message about? What is this new age she's predicting? What is the star alignment about? When is it happening? And so we're trying to look at the data through the lens of the tasking, because I think that you're all good remote viewers. I think you all hit the target. So now it's about making sense of what is the target data telling us about the target. And so I did see this idea as it feels expected, but still sudden somehow. And the idea of danger is going to come back in a few people's data. And again, we saw in Claudia's data that idea of it feels like a machine. And I think we see that in everyone's data, this cyclical nature of it. And because, like I said, I've done a session where I was also describing things happening in the sky, and I was describing a machine. There's a mechanical process somehow. Maybe simulation theorist. Ooh, maybe they could interpret that as support for the idea that it's a simulated sky for our simulated reality, and the machine where remote viewers are peering through the layers and we're seeing the machinery underneath the sim. I think that's maybe my favorite playful interpretation for that data today. Chris, here you have this data set about the phenomenon. There's spreading, there's advancement. Tell us a little bit about all of this.
I don't remember that part of my session.
That's okay. I did think it was interesting that, John, you have the exact same sketch, even to the point of having the 3 leaves on the one side. I thought that was really interesting. And Chris is talking about as a part of a cycle, and we're at the beginning of the cycle, and it's going to continue over a few years to eventually blossom. So again, that idea of like we're shifting slowly from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And so I think that was really good data. Did you have a sensation for this, John, that maybe ties into that? Or because it was all on one page, you had flames.
Yeah. So that was my, that's funny, because I think that was on my general sketch when I just try to get a visual of the target, which I never successfully get an actual visual of the target. It's almost always conceptual. But, I didn't know what that meant. It does resemble that, Chris's sketch for sure. But I also, I knew nothing about this story or Chris Bledsoe. I'd never heard of him before you last night when you sent the email. But I was listening to some YouTube videos of him just telling his story. And one of the stories he was talking about in one of his experiences, something about is either the lady or the orbs or something appeared as flames. I don't know if anyone else had heard that or if that's true, but he was describing something as flames, and the flames were orange and then red or something like that. And so anyway, when I heard that today, I immediately thought that's what my sketch meant, was resembling that. But I don't know. It could match whatever Chris was tapping.
No, I think that's actually a good interpretation. I think that if she was seen appearing in flames, then that's good data for that. I like that.
Yes, if I may interrupt, I also heard something today that he was waiting for a sign to go somewhere, and then he got 3 times in one night that the tops of a tree was burning, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So
that's
that could
so
also
interesting, because that ties into the 3 denials of Christ, right? Like I'm just looking at all the different patterns, right? And so, there's something there that's really interesting. Yeah. Now, we talked about these man-made stars, and Cody, you have this hand that's holding this blue light egg thing, and I do, in a very playful way, I can see this as maybe being this idea of man-made stars. So it's a star you can hold in your hand, right? So I think there's something there that's kind of interesting, maybe. I was doing research into all these different things and trying to find out as much as I could. There is this painting by Leonardo da Vinci called Salvator Mundi, and we're going to see later on how I came to this. But for now, just take it at face value. He's holding a sphere, a glass sphere, and there are 3 stars in it. And it's very much like what you've drawn, Cody. So I think there's something here. There's a correlation here that I wanted to point out, because what we're going to see maybe on the next slide, yes, is that the stars in the sphere that Jesus figure is holding seem to match the stars in the Leo constellation. This one's a little bit darker and darker, and this one's a little bit lighter. And the angle as well is quite a good match. And the distance, the ratio, it looks like it's a depiction of that part of Leo. And so there's something there where you have this painting of Jesus, and Chris Bledsoe is a Christian, and that's a big part of his message. And he's holding a glass sphere, and you have this drawing of a hand holding one of these blue spheres. And in the painting, it's the constellation that we're talking about. So there's just there's all these little synchronicities here that are pointing to a deeper meaning. I just wanted to know if you like that, or does that appeal to you? Does that amuse you at all?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I thought I went off on a bit of a side quest in that part of the session and went somewhere else, but yeah.
Yeah, that's amusing to me too. I was just that rung a bell, and I just looked back on my second session. I have and maybe this is coming up later, but I have a sphere with a hand on it that says "hand seems to be rubbing a shiny object like a crystal ball." So
I don't have that in my slides.
right, but yeah, that's as soon as I saw this photo you brought up, it's like, oh, okay, that's
we have to put that. I'm going to add that in to my slide deck when someone else is talking, because that's a definite match for Cody's.
That kind of came through again later as the gift I was talking about.
Yes.
That the people on the journey were given someone.
And I think that fits because people on a journey, so our stars are shifting, and so we're kind of on that journey with the zodiac telling our destinies, right? In that belief system, these are our destinies that are shifting. So we're on this journey, and then this is a gift of stability. The stars start to fall, and then they find a new pole star to anchor to, and then that's that stability. So yeah, I just thought this was the way the data came together for me, for this in particular, was just really magical. So Cody, yeah, you were not going off on a tangent here. You were really still on target, getting really fun data. I love this kind of thing because it's so weird. And Salvatore Mundi, people have been arguing about what this represents, why these 3 stars, what constellation is this? And so I just thought that was really fantastic. And here's Chris, in your data, you have savior and salvation. And I thought that was hilarious. And Italy. So we have the Italian for Leonardo da Vinci. And so I thought that was kind of funny. You have the idea of harvest, and Patrick as well had the idea of harvesting of information. So that was a nice little correlation there. And then the kingdom come, all of those kind of religious overtones, I think, and the idea of battle. And we're going to see that in Michael's work as well. And the arrival, the finish line, and you party when you get to the next stable star, because you need the stable pole star to be able to navigate, to be able to know where you are when you're sailing in the oceans. And so here, and John, your flames, Chris, your plants, and also your diamond shape with these. It could also be Scorpius. Scorpius sits under Ophiuchus. There's a whole other storyline there that we're not going to go into, but I'm just putting it out there as something fun. And then here, this is why, Chris, I think that this pi symbol with the 2 stars link well to Pegasus. You have this idea of maybe there's some sort of fusion, there's some kind of a stability that's producing an output, and it's amazingly stable. At first, when I was first looking at this, I wondered if it was this idea that, are we going to start using solar power for energy? Is that the new thing that's coming, the new age of solar power? It might be, but I think the data might map on better to just the idea of the faking of the stars. I want people to think about that. Pluto winked out for a while, and all the astronomy community was like, one of our planets has disappeared from the sky. And then later it reappeared. And there's never really been an explanation for that. And I do wonder if there was something happening, if the Earth's magnetic field was weakening, and if that was distorting how we see the sky. And if the military, the governments had ways to create fake stars, would they maybe hide the fact that some of our stars are winking out by just creating fake ones in their place so that we wouldn't notice? It's not something I've thought about, but when I saw your data and I was putting all your data together, that story just came so vividly to me of, they're faking the stars. I don't know, but it's fun to think about and it's playful and the data kind of points to it. So I just thought I'd put that out there as a playful little theory.
My
And
my
so
vote is they're doing it from the moon, from their moon base. That's my vote. No, I'm just teasing.
your vote, putting laser stars from the moon.
Yeah,
David Icke is
we're in the
funding it.
Truman Show.
Yeah, it is though. It's the Truman Show. And someone has Truman Show data we're gonna see later. The battle. So Michael, you had a lot of the battle, the conflict, and I wanted you to see this data for Chris's. He's talking about the battle. There seems to be shots fired in different directions, and it's going to be like this until we find stability. So again, it's this idea of until the next pole star comes into place, in the meantime, there's no pole star. So there's this sense of all the stars are moving in every which way, which they're not. But if you're an observer on the Earth and all of a sudden you've lost your navigation tool, it could seem that way. And so, Michael, you had these idea of like conflicting different parties. And I think we're going to move through a few slides and then you can give us some input on if you think that works. But I do think, Chris, I want people to look at what you've drawn here, the different directions and the cross going this way. Because Jeff drew the exact same thing. So
That's
if you
funny.
guys want to talk about that a little bit in relation to this idea of handmade stars.
Yeah, that's interesting to have such a similar pattern. Although on the previous slide, my interpretation would be a bit different related to the target, what I would have thought here. After I received the feedback for this target, because this was kind of a timeline thing. So this battle is the present, there is the past in small, and there's the future on the side. To me, I thought that in the past, because the target is Chris Bledsoe and his lady, and so it's a bit of this UFO / spiritual thing. So I had the interpretation that in the past it seems like it's hidden on the ground. Nobody knows really a lot about it or is aware of it. So if we go back to the UFO topic or the UAP topic, it was kind of underground, only in the UFO sector, not sector, but like in the UFO group stuff. Then in the present, there's battle. There seems to be shots fired in different direction. It seems like there's so many stories coming out and so many people contradicting each other and disinformation, information, whoever saying the real stuff. There seems to be like, I mean, everybody knows about it now. I mean, it became something cuckoo from the side to something that's in the mainstream news now. So there seems to be that part, and then in the future, whatever it is, whether it is real UFOs or some kind of thing about reality or whatever it is, in the future, in what I put in the timeline, that there seems to be some kind of stability. So there could be like some like living together, if I can say it like that, or something being incorporated in our daily lives or reality. So that's more the way I interpret it. I don't know if it makes sense what I just said, but
Yeah.
that's the way I interpreted it.
Yes. I think for me, the way the data came together, and because now I've seen a lot of the data from this group and also from other viewers, I didn't see much about UFOs. I didn't see anything about aliens. I didn't see, yeah. And so, but let's look at the next sets of data. Let's see what the data says in the next slides. But I do want to point out right here. So we see your data, Chris, and we see Patrick drawing nearly the exact same thing, and the idea of the focus point and the light, and that they're, again, this idea that they're focusing the laser maybe in order to create the fake star, right? I think that that's maybe what's going on here. And we have Michael's laser with the bright flash. and Cody has this on the inside. So again, it's that exact kind of same. And like I said, at first I was like, are they talking about star power using solar power, but as an energy source of some kind, or kind of what's going on here? But to me, it does seem to point something to something maybe more like that. And especially because Jeff has this as a glow. Jeff, or sorry, someone said something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if it is about the fake stars and that the future is that there's a lot of output and it's amazingly stable, we're screwed.
Right? Jeff, talk about your glow, because it came through with a different context than Chris's, I think. Is Jeff still with us? Yes, there he is.
You're on mute.
You're
Yeah.
muted, Jeff.
Am I now? That was weird. That was a case where I drew what I saw, but I didn't really have an interpretation of it. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what I drew.
Yeah, that's interesting when that happens,
So-
isn't it? It's hard to decrypt. And so here we have a lot of your data, Jeff. Seeing with your own eyes, again, maybe seeing the stars. And here's why I think that this is relevant. You saw this as ephemeral, short-lived, and these sodium stars, they have to keep putting the laser energy into them, otherwise they'll blink out, like an orb that is there and then disappears. And John, you have these ideas of like these shiny ornaments on a Christmas tree. So again, that idea of like, oh, look here, it's something shiny and it's a beautiful star, but it's just an ornament. And then and Claudia, you also had this idea of this mass contracting into a small ball. So again, that idea of like maybe the sodium layer, and then it compresses into a little glowing ball of a star. I don't know, but I think that there's something going on here in all of your data.
One thing I wanted to just throw out there, but again, I just was listening to this guy's stories, but before he saw the lady, and I guess for years before that, he was seeing orbs and sees orbs all the time. And he was saying there are different sizes. Sometimes they're large, and then they shrink down to smaller sizes. So when I saw the shiny ornaments, the focus was on the ornaments in my perception. I assumed that was the orbs, but I guess it could be the stars too. But
no, it could be the plasma orbs, definitely, right? And a lot of people who see UFOs also seem to see or talk about seeing orbs, experiencing orbs. Has anyone here seen an orb that would want to talk about it a little bit? Or are we too shy?
Yeah, I've seen some, but again, I think it's context, right? Because I do think that there are some that are more plasma based in the air, right? But you can also see more etherically, like when you go to a haunted house, you can see if you're in the right state of mind. Sometimes I think the environment creates an effect where your awareness is allowed to perceive something it normally would not be able to perceive. But other times, if you bring your awareness up, if you go into the right state of mind, you can actually peel back the layers of reality enough to perceive these orbs. I remember seeing one even within an office space when I was in a meeting at Intel, and I was in this group of people, and I was bored to tears about what they were talking about. So I just went into an elevated state, and I just went into a state of observation. I didn't expect anything. And I saw this orb, this white etheric orb, basically just undulating and moving through the room towards me. I never expect that, because I've seen them in haunted houses, but not in a corporate building. So that one really surprised me. But what I'm talking about, I believe, is very different than perceiving a plasma orb out in the atmosphere or near the ground level, right? Very different. Also, something like a satellite or a star that moves, somebody might define that as an orb, high up in the atmosphere, but it may be a completely different relationship to these other types of things.
I would agree with that there's something that, I don't know if we can call them psychic orbs, but there's something about orbs that are maybe coalescing consciousness of some kind, and you maybe experience them when you are in like you said, an altered state or in a meditative state or something like that. And I think that might be a little bit different from the orbs we saw attacking drones in New Jersey earlier this year. I think that there's a difference between those two. Yeah.
Anyone else see any orbs?
Just on YouTube.
I will say in his story, he also said they were always in groups of 3. When he
Oh,
would see them.
fantastic!
Yeah, he said they were always in 3, every time, always in 3.
That's good. That makes sense of the 3 that I mentioned earlier keeps coming up in Claudia's data, especially. And I was wondering, what is that 3 for? Interesting.
Well, I've never seen an orb, only on photos. When I made photos, later on things showed up.
Yes.
I love it. Interesting.
It's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah.
Here we have some data from Patrick about this. He sees this as a physics experiment to harvest information. He sees it as a lab setup. And here he has the wormhole data point that Claudia, you had as well, and someone else has that we'll see later. I think maybe Jeff in one of your rows, I think from your Playfair. It relates in shape and basics equal. I'm not really sure what this is. The idea of bending light, the idea of concentration or accumulation of energy or light. So again, to me, because his data here matches yours so well, and he did get good data around it, and he is really talking about an experiment, a setup. I think that there's something there to maybe pay attention to at the very least. And he talks about this being an in-between process that's occurring where it kind of develops this shape before maybe diffusing. And then here is the prison bars around Leo, the constellation, the vertical lines, and he's talking about it as patterns like an encasing. And it's about measuring. It's kind of like a code or a language to measure. And I think that that can apply in very different ways to this one same data set. In boxing data, we saw that with Leo being caged, being trapped in Cody's session. So I think that this is really interesting as well from Patrick. He also talks about the idea of maybe esoteric-like energy in the sense that it's different. There's a surplus of energy, and there's something switch-like about it. You turn it on, you turn it off. There's a mechanical setup to this to contain it. This, to me, helped me to kind of come to this interpretation that I have come to. So Patrick's data was really instrumental, I think, in seeing that. And then, Claudia, when I saw your data, the idea of the military testings in secrecy, a lot of data about the machines, but that can be interpreted conceptually or literally. So it's up to us to decide. You have that idea of like the turning, the twisting, the tumbling, the new era, right? So the new age. And then here again is your star or this droplet. It feels like water. We were talking about that earlier. Changing shape.
Yeah, maybe this is the orb then. When I reread it, I thought, oh, maybe this was in the orb, not water.
It's an experiment that they're working on. It's needed for a better result, and that the air or steam is changing the temperature to put it higher due to the sandy element. I think that might be the sodium. I'm not sure, but it would be one way to see it. I'm not sure how to interpret this in the lens of the orbs for some of the data. That doesn't mean that it can't be. So yeah, I just think that a lot of interesting data. And then you did such a good job with your location. You gave
really?
Yeah. Your location is so far in the Arctic Circle that Google won't even let me get there because Google doesn't show you the North Pole. Doesn't like anyone looking up there, and so it kind of maxes out. So here I have 84 and 88 because I couldn't go any higher. Google wouldn't let me, but it shows you that you're moving towards the pole star there, Claudia.
Good job, Claudia. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I'll let you guys talk about this for a little bit of a moment. Oh, Claudia, this is your data. And I'm sorry that it's not bounded in orange to show, but this is Claudia's data. I'm going to write this. This is Claudia's data. So Claudia, again, really, really strong data, because here you're telling us about the North Pole, looking up at the North Pole. And then what do we see there? We see the dragon. And that is the dragon constellation that I talked about earlier as being the center of the poles that are turning around, that are changing from where we are now, Polaris, to where it will eventually be in the far future. So you saw a dragon or a phoenix, and again, a phoenix rises from its ashes. So the death of one star that we saw in Jeff's data, and then the new pole star rises. And then the idea that the color is red, I didn't have time to look at whether the next pole star, the head of Cephas right here, whether it's red or a red star or not. It would be really cool if it was. And even the drawing, you can see here, these stars are not traditionally a part of Draco, but I think it matches the two wings that you have. I just think it's a really good drawing. Do you want to talk about that a little bit while I grab a glass of water?
Well, I'm surprised because I did not even know there was a constellation named Draco. So, yeah, I really saw this fantasy thing flying. So maybe, yeah, the flying aspect is that it's in the sky. And, but yeah, I thought it was some kind of threat coming from it. So maybe then the meaning that it will the shift from A to B, so that it will be the new center. Yeah, I find it a bit intimidating. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of the fact that that there's the concept of danger, the concept of destruction comes through in a lot of people's data. Yeah, but I did think that this was an excellent job. Really fantastic data there. Good job.
Thank you.
And then here, John, again, I don't know why these don't have boundaries. This is John's data. And so it should be in the pale blue boundary. And so again, so John, here you're talking about something behind this. I have to move it. There we go. So again, the soft material like cotton, I think it's the dressing on the stars, the constellations maybe. And then you have the idea of a lizard. And I thought, I wonder if that's tied into the dragon that Claudia drew for us. You have the idea of like connecting points for a path. So I think that fits with the constellations. But did you want to say something about this as well? Because this could be maybe more related to UFO if you wanted it to.
Yeah. When I first got the perception, I was thinking, it kind of made me think about UFO, but I didn't really get a lot of other things, flying airborne structures or anything, and the rest of my data, and usually I do, if it was that kind of target. But yeah, I didn't know what to make of it, to be honest. So I don't have much to say about it.
Yeah, no, that works. I think it's good data for constellations and star imagery. I think it works. I think the lizard is actually a really good fit for Draco. So I thought that was really nice. And especially in the light of the drawings of your star, the constellation, you're talking about this person being flipped over, right? His head is on top and now his head is in the bottom. So it's that shifting, something falling and shifting. So I think that's really good data. And then Jeff, this is all about, again, something going location 1 to location 2. And there's a beam of light that's directional and it transforms from one place, or it transitions from one place to another. And then you have the star trails moving, all the stars that are in motion around the pole star. And this idea of it doesn't occur on a repeated frequency, but when it does occur, it needs to restore balance. The idea that it occurs when there's a weakness. I wonder about the weakening magnetic field. And an external stimulus suggests a change of direction. I'm wondering about this. So how did this come through to you? Because that's a bit of a weird data piece that I'm not really sure how we make sense of.
I don't know what more to add to it. So the one thing that I did look with regard to the lady this morning was Chris talking about traveling from one place to the other to see her and being guided along the way and the path to her was a beam of light. So that's sort of what I saw in my first picture, but it could be interpreted a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
it could be a symbol as well. I wonder about that. Because as a remote viewer, and even as a human, no, but as a remote viewer, even in my personal life, the non-remote viewing life, I have seen things that were not what they appeared to be, right? That I was seeing something, but it is the meaning. Your brain is always interpreting. Oh, I should have had the visual optical illusions for the next live stream. I'll show that. But you're never really seeing what's there. You're always seeing what your brain thinks is useful for you to see for your survival. So I think it's interesting. And then here, so this was really confusing to me at first until I realized that the next pole star is this star here in Cepheus. Because at first I was like, what is going on with this? Why is everyone telling me about this cabin? This wooden cabin. I was like, is Chris Bledsoe? Does he live in a cabin? And he does live in the countryside in North Carolina. But I think there's more to this. So Jeff, and your data, and again, the data is so playful. You have it as like, it's the maple syrup packaging. So if you think of the constellation as like the packaging of the stars that we wrap around the stars so that we can kind of track them and make sense of them. I thought that was a really nice way of describing it. And it's a container again, right? And so you container for sweet fluid for the stars. And in Claudia's as well, there's Claudia's 3 windows for the 3 orbs, I guess, that accompany some of Chris Bledsoe's sightings. And here you have your 3 people here, and your tractor here for transport, for motion. And earlier in your session, Claudia, your tractors tend to have 3 wheels on each side, so 6 wheels in total. And so I did see this correlation as maybe pointing to Cepheus, the next pole star, in the shape. And also because, Jeff, here, it looks like you drew it and you're like, no, that's not the right position. It has to be a little bit higher up. And so that was a nice little data point. And John, you have this as maybe a drawing. So what do you guys make of this? Is this fun? Is this interesting? What do you think?
I feel validated that somebody else drew a cabin. I did not know what this was. I drew this 3 different ways, 3 different times. I'm like, this doesn't seem to make sense with the rest of the data, but I'll include it. Okay.
Well, I had the same thing. I thought I'm totally crazy. What with this barn and this rural surrounding? I also thought that this Chris might come from, well, in the middle of nowhere, that he lived there in North Carolina, that I picked up that. So maybe, yeah, it's a very interesting suggestion, Sifus. Yeah.
Well, because at first I was the same. I was looking at these cabins like, I don't understand. Why are you all giving me cabins? Yeah. And some of the details that you were all fixating on, I was like, okay, the fact that Jeff feels it's important that the chimney is at the right height, that means that there's something about that that's important, that ratio or that proportion. So that's part of how you do analysis. You look at if a viewer says, oh no, this completely irrelevant part of the structure has to be 1/4 of an inch higher because otherwise my sketch isn't correct. You have to pay attention to that. It's telling you something about the data. It's just telling you there's meaning here. And so I just thought, I spent a little bit of time being like, maple, and also that it was kind of coming through differently. For Jeff is the maple syrup container, and for Claudia is this barn in the outback somewhere.
Well, I started to talk about the Amish, I found something strange was going on there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think I've actually spotted Cephas in my own data as well too. Essentially, one of the images I drew was a folded map of the Pacific Ocean, and there was one of those cardinal direction points. And it does actually look like a house, like the actual Cephas constellation, with the top one pointing north on it. So
you're right.
That's a pretty good interpretation. That
I have it coming up in one of the next slides.
Oh.
But no, but I didn't see the Cepheus part of it. I saw something else. I saw the, yeah. So bring it up again. The Amish though, and I worry a little bit. And then is the military hiring land or work from the Amish in order to conduct tests in secrecy? Again, there's this idea of the military that are doing secret tests that's tied into the data at all levels. I don't know what to make of that yet, but it's something to think about. So here, and another interesting point. So Jeff, you talk about male energy related to this cabin, and you have like the lumberjack, and Claudia's talking about the Amish men and the military men, and then it's Cepheus is also known as Cepheus the King, and traditionally, so the constellation is both the king's palace, but it used to be, or no, now it is the more traditional one that we use today is the seated king on his throne. With Cepheus upside down. So again, I thought that was kind of interesting. So we have Jeff and Claudia and John here as well, I think. And then we have H.A. Ray, who presents it like this. Earthsky.org presents it this way, so they don't put the link in between these two stars. And then the more traditional looks like this. It's the king, and he's holding a scepter. And this star is beneath his foot down here. So I just thought that was interesting. And of course, this is how Wikipedia shows it. The least helpful. Here's what to look for in the sky. It looks the same as Pegasus. You can't even tell if that's Pegasus or Cepheus. So thank you, Wikipedia, for that. And Patrick did a great job of drawing the different star, because when you look at the star names, they have like epsilon and beta for some of these stars. So good data, good work there, Patrick. And then here's similarities between Patrick and Chris again. But we've already kind of talked about this, so we don't have to go over it again. But Michael, did you want to talk about this in terms of the sense of historical events and current events and the idea of conflict and war?
Yeah, sure. So,
and a chain reaction.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I did note earlier on when you mentioned about like these 4 Persian stars, basically. And I did to get the image of some old European warships at sea. One of them was firing a cannon, which turned into the laser. I kind of asked what this was about, said about military testing and exercises related to supremacy and deterrence. And so it kind of made me think of like maybe some like shifting balance of like power or something, maybe some more topical current events related to that. I was thinking that may have been an interpretive overlay of some kind related to it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting that I'm not the only person kind of picked up on that as well too. So.
And it's hard when there's so much going on in the news. If you get a little bit of a sense of conflict, a little bit of a sense of the military, it's hard to not kind of go there. And you're talking about stars, and nukes are kind of very close to how stars work. And so, yeah, I can see that in your data. Yeah. But I still think that your data was still excellent. Even when there's an overlay, I wanted to say this, even if you know you have an overlay, keep working your sessions, because the analyst can still get the data underlying the overlay. We can still see the pattern. And especially when you have a group like this where everyone's giving high level data and you have really great group effect, you have a really nice coherence. There's so much resonance between all of you that the overlay doesn't matter. I can strip that right off and see, okay, where the matching with other people's data, and what does that mean in other people's data, and then how do we make sense of it? So never worry about an overlay. Don't let it stop you from collecting data. So here's one of my earlier slides where I was kind of like, oh, maybe they're talking about using solar power as a stable power source. And then later I was like, no, because now there's all this other data that came in having to do with perhaps fake stars for better imaging. And here you were talking about, Michael, your old European warship at sea. And it was interesting to me. We're going to talk about this in the next slides as well, but the Milky Way being seen as a flow of water, the Nile River, all of these kinds of things. Patrick had data about explaining a model, the space in between, what's the significance. It's a science-like setup. So again, this idea of like a scientific experiment is happening, and there's ideas of cleansing and purification, and we're going to come back to this later, but his idea of like frequency and spheres. So this might have to do with the orbs, the frequency. We'll talk about that in a few slides. And then he talks about going from 3D to scale in 2D. And to me, I think of the 3D stars that are real, and then the 2D stars that are just excitations in the sodium layer of our atmosphere. So I think that that actually does map onto this data here. And here you were mentioning, Michael, the idea of firing from a cannon turns into maybe the laser beam. And there's something of a scientific nature that helps you make that link. Here's your atomic nuclei as well. So
Yeah.
I definitely think that you can interpret in various ways.
Yeah, I felt the need to draw a little smoke rising from one of the cannon outlets for the ships to as like a smoke signal in a way too. So,
and I wonder if these are stars. It says here in the Google's AI overview, early explorers used Polaris, the pole star, to navigate due to its position almost directly above the Earth's North Pole. By observing the angle of Polaris above the horizon, they could determine their latitude. This, combined with other navigational techniques, helped them chart courses and find their way across oceans, vast distances. So I think that your European boat does tie into Polaris, both on a literal interpretation, but also conceptual as the constellations that are moving in relation to the Milky Way. And so here's more of your military testing and exercise. What's being tested is an advanced weapon system, mechanical disruption at the microscopic level, and then you have that frequency. Oops, how did I do that? How do I undo that? There we go.
we're lost in space now.
It was funny. Back. So yeah, so I think that was really interesting. And Claudia, I have your data here in relation. You have this mountain range. It's quiet and it's an excellent spot to test things. And before I have you speak about this, I'm going to show the same data in a different context with other people's data. But again, notice, Claudia, you have this 3. Again, always the 3. And the 2 trees that we saw that are always around the goddess or the god, right?
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
And so here I'm bringing you guys back a little bit, back on track to the target, which is Regulus, the bright star seen in Leo. It has 2 companions, a set of binary stars, but observations in the past few years suggest there may be a white dwarf. So there might be 3 stars that we call the star Regulus, but it might actually be 3 stars that are all interacting with each other. That might be the significance of the 3. So where Jeff, we have the 3 flower planters, flower boxes, and Claudia has a 3 everywhere in her session. It might be because the star Regulus, which is part of the target, is 3 stars. And then some extra information here that I think if people have been kind of paying attention, they might find a double meaning or an underlying secret meaning here. But Regulus can stray within the ecliptic. So this is the path the sun travels on and the planets travel. And sometimes Regulus is eclipsed by other planets, including Venus. So I think and 1959, if you look on your timeline, Claudia, you have the 1950s as your starting date. So I think the idea of something that is marked by, the beginning is marked by Regulus being occulted by Venus, Venus being the goddess of beauty and love, which connects to the lady. There are connections here that people can make for themselves. And then here, Cody, did you want to say a little? This is about your charioteer, your auriga, your hexagonal structure. The idea that it feels destructive. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I'm curious about why everyone's getting a sense of destruction coming with this. Oh, you're muted, Cody.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really remember what was going on. It just it was all related to that ball thing. it just felt like it come through in a few different ways. It felt 1 minute it felt like a gift, 1 minute it felt like it was to do with navigation, 1 minute it felt like it had something to do with destruction. So I really couldn't get a grasp of this target while I was doing it, apart from the journey towards the end. But yeah, it felt like kind of like a landslide. I'll put it that way.
So the landslide makes sense because if you look at the stars from the surface of the Earth, you would essentially see the dome of the sky above you from horizon to horizon slip. So instead
Yeah.
of the pole star being there, all of a sudden it shifts and now it's over there. So that's a really
then-
good description.
And then later on, it came through like a wave tipping a boat over. Like it was, yeah.
And so we'll see that. And I've been too slow. Sorry, guys. I'm going to start moving things along a bit faster. So sorry. I do apologize. I'm always so slow on these. Okay, so here, looking at Regulus by the Milky Way. So Cody, I'm basing this on your Easter Island man looking behind him. Auriga, so the constellation that you were kind of really focused on, the hexagonal shape, it's positioned along the edge of the Milky Way galaxy. And that's why it's a great location for observing various celestial objects. And so it seemed to me that you were looking at this, and Claudia's sketch matches, I think, fairly closely. And you're talking about standing on a steep landscape next to water. I don't think it's a real landscape by real water. And for purpose of exploration, I think we're talking about the stars in the Milky Way. And then the Regulus, again, appears as a single star, but it's actually a quadruple star system composed of 4 stars that are organized into 2 pairs. So I wonder if these are the 2 pairs. You have, you kind of have these 2 big mountains, and then you have these 2 smaller ones. And Claudia has the 2 big mountains. She has 3 smaller ones down here. You have a 3rd one here. So I wonder if that maybe has something to do with that, just for people to think about. And then
those two drawings was pretty cool to see, because I do see strong correlation. It's just amazing.
it makes me think of, I don't know if people have watched The Office. I haven't really watched much of it, but I've seen the meme all over Twitter of like, it's the same picture. Michael gets it. Nobody else. That's okay though. But I see something like that, and I'm like, it's the same picture. 2 people drew the exact same thing. They're both blind. They didn't communicate with each other. They didn't see each other's sessions, and they drew the exact same thing. And it's always shocking. It doesn't matter how often I see it. It always shocks me. Here, Chris, you have this landscape here, and I don't know, I was looking at it. There was something about it that kept annoying me because I thought at first I just dismissed it as it's a landscape, but it doesn't seem to map onto any of the data. So I just kind of left it aside. But it kept pinging me, like, pay attention to me. When I learned how to do spoon bending using psychic abilities, I was in my kitchen once after having spent an hour bending spoons, and there was a fork on my counter, and I can't explain it in a way that doesn't sound weird, but it called my attention to it. And when I picked it up, I playfully said to my fork, because I lived alone, oh, do you want to bend too? Do you want to play? And I just tapped it, and the tine just fell right. It just bent right over. I hadn't done any work on it. It had just been listening to me in the other room bending spoons. And so I think I've learned to tune into that ability of like, sometimes we think that everything is in our control. We impose our will to bend reality. But when you do spoon bending, metal bending, psychic ability application in that kind of way, at least for me, I've learned that there's some kind of a cooperation, that you tell the spoon, okay, we're going to bend you, okay, and it'll be fine. You'll still have a use. You'll be a very pretty object on my shelf. And you can show your spoon another bent spoon, and that actually makes it easier. This is what we're doing. Oh, okay. But there's a moment where you feel the spoon decide to collaborate, or it just cooperates, and it's a weird feeling. And so when I get a sense of like there's something that's wanting my attention, like in Jeff's sketch where I could see he had he had increased the height of the chimney by a quarter inch. Here, Chris, I was going to ignore your sketch, but I kept kind of thinking about it. And I do actually think it kind of fits the South Atlantic anomaly. And I think that that's a really weird thing that you have. Let me grab this. You have this kind of divot here that matches really well with the divot that you see here. So I've kind of, here it's stretched out. I've kind of compressed it. And then you have this kind of peak here and that peak here. And even you have like the sea, the ocean. And of course, that's on the Pacific Ocean. And then this dip here, I see that as you can see that the magnetic field is disrupted in this kind of pattern, right? You can see it in the blue and the green. And I think that that's playfully fun. I thought, oh, that's really cute. I quite like that. And Cody, when I saw your world map and that there's something about journeying, again, the stars are moving above us, and so from the ground, if you're and again you can see that your paths are all in water. So the explorers that are using the pole star for their navigation, they're relying on that, they're on a journey. And so if the stars start moving around and they're not where you expect them to be, or, and this is where I think Chris's sketch comes in, if your magnetic declination starts to change because the magnetic field is being a bit wonky, then you can't rely on magnetic declination to tell you where you are. And now you can't rely on the pole star either. So I think that there's something about that. Maybe we're coming into an age where the magnetic field is weakening, so the declination is going to be changing. And the pole star is, over the next 1,000 years, is going to be shifting out of the center. So just kind of some fun stuff to think about. Cody, really, really good job here. The period of the journey that you're talking about here. So again, this journeying, you have it very close to the astrological age. So the astrological age, the age of Pisces, the age of Aquarius, it's about 2150 and you have 1250. So I think you just reversed the numbers here. And so good job on that. And Michael, again, that idea of efficiency of movement and navigation matches really well with this data set. And so you have the pirate map of the seas with the dotted line, and I'm going to show that in a little bit. And Cody has this boat. Oh yeah, and this is the procession. Cody, your boat. I tried to stay away from the Egyptian data because it's a bit. I think it's a superficial overlay, but it does match the solar boats that the Egyptian art so well that I don't think we can ignore that. And even so, here we see the sun. So this is the sun being transported in the chariot. So Auriga was the charioteer, and you were describing the charioteer, the constellation. And then here we see the sun being transported in the chariot, the sun bark. This is what it looks like when you're not seeing the cutout of the inside. It's like a box, and that's exactly what you drew. And I think that there's a tie-in with your boat, Michael. Oh, it happened again. So, Cody, tell us about this. What do you think about your Egyptian boat carrying the sun?
Yeah, that's what I thought. They were delivering the gift. They're on the journey to give someone a gift. And then that's when all the destruction kind of happened when they kind of got there. But yeah, I wasn't sure if that's where the lion was in the boat. That's why I kind of drew it like that.
Oh, so the lion is in the boat. So the lion is Regulus and it's moving to a different alignment.
I was really tempted to try and draw a lion in the boat, and I thought, nah, I'm not doing it.
That makes a lot of sense. And also the idea that the gift, and we're going to see this in a couple slides, the gift is a star and it's being given. So in Egyptian, it's usually art, you see it as the sun, but the sun is a star, according to the mainstream model. And so that kind of makes sense, right? That the gift is the sun, is a star, it's a new star, and the destruction that it causes, that concerns me. Again, I didn't know that there were, well, that's not true. There is maybe stories of destruction linked to the changing of ages, but your data is all kind of seems to be pointing to that, which surprises me. And then I think that the journey crossing the Milky Way, crossing the cosmos, you know, Cody, you're talking about it feeling tilted. We saw that earlier. And Michael, you have this surfboard like thing. And Cody, you have pretty much the same shape in water as well. And Michael, this splash in this water, I take this to be the Milky Way because I think it fits for the data in the context of everybody else's data. And Jeff, here's your wormhole kind of thing that Claudia had mentioned earlier in relation to flooding, spinning, motion. And then here's your map. So Michael, you're talking, this is, yes, you're so right. This is Cepheus. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this book and public kind of draw this map. So it came up as the Pacific Ocean, and they started like drawing more islands. And I felt like there's a part of me that wanted to draw more islands, just like, you know, cover the place with it. But it also kind of felt like, yeah, this is kind of more or less what I was consciously trying to be going with.
And
And
you
yeah,
know what?
sorry.
I just, before I forget, so later on in the slides, you'll see that I have this as one of the dippers. It's not. This is Draco. This is the
Okay.
Draco head, and that's the Draco's body and tail. And that's why this is where Cepheus is. That makes sense because Draco's in the center and the pole stars are all around him.
Right. Okay, so I drew enough. Yeah. So pulled enough of the data to like make sense of it. All right.
That's
Good to hear.
amazing.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so this also kind of came shortly after the surfboard I drew. I kind of got this idea of hydrodynamism, so something that flows through water easily, kind of came across with that. And then I asked, you know, where is there a particular place this is going, this navigation? And then this map came up, and that's when I drew the dotted line, the X, the other islands, the Cephas.
So for everyone who's looking, that's definitely the same shape. And then the Draco, I want to go back to where we had Claudia's dragon. So you can see it looks, it's like a little box here for the head, and then there's the body and the motion, right? You can see the same thing here. To me, and then there's Cepheus, the king.
And isn't the current in relationship to Cepheus on what you just showed with the circle, isn't the current pole star to the left where the X would be on the map? Even though Draco's closer to it.
There's Draco here. So here's his head and here's his body, and his tail is going towards Polaris. Polaris is part of the Ursa Minor, and there's Cepheus. Oh, really
Cepheus
well
is to the
done.
right. I was thinking the pole star was actually represented the X on his map, but you got it flipped the other way. Okay.
Yeah, which happens.
Oh, I guess it depends on your perspective, perhaps. But.
Yeah, it looks like Cepheus should be on the other side, but
you have it marked as N for north, so there's your new North Star.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's amazing.
This came up during the physical overview section of the chapter I was working on, so it feels like it's quite appropriate for like terms of actual physical makeup and everything.
That's always exciting when you can get the physical description and it matches up so precisely. And I want to say, I've seen it in everyone's session for this target. Everyone had sketches that just blew me away because you're drawing the constellation, or because you're drawing the exact details, or because you're drawing the exact same thing. There was so much this month that I was just, it was really fantastic. And I've tied this into John talking about, this location might be important, and it looks as well like you're pointing to somewhere near the North Pole, which is where Claudia also had her X. And I think that there's something to it there. I'm going to skip this information. People can look it up for themselves. And then here, so it's so funny because normally I show David your sessions so that we can talk about them, and just because it's fun to share, and I like for him to kind of see your work and keep tabs on what's going on. And this time though, because I thought, but then he has to sit through the live streams and he's seen all of it and he's heard me prattle on, oh my goodness, I think this and I think that. So this time I didn't show him at all, and I didn't talk to him about it. And so it's hilarious to me that, David, that you brought up the the Easter Island man. Because there it is.
Independently, it came to the same conclusion. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting time with the Pacific Ocean map as well too, maybe slightly.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And Cody, I think it's Easter Island, it's the Easter timing, it's the equinox. So I do think that it's not necessarily pointing us to something happening in the island, but I think just to the equinox being significant. And that's what the lady had said. That's what Chris Bledsoe says is going to happen, the equinox, April, Easter of 2026. Yeah, so great data there, Cody. And then here we go. So Cody, we'll start you off because you've met. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you go back just a second?
Yeah.
I just realized, I mean, it's a stretch, but his figure is holding something that makes me think of the egg from the Christ.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
He's holding the gift.
Okay. I don't know if you guys. One more quick thing. I don't know if anyone else heard Chris Bledsoe tell the story, but in his story, when he went to meet the lady, he was handed something that they said, this is a gift, this is for you, and it was like tubular. He described it was some sort of animal, but he couldn't see it because it was dark. But they told him to keep it, and he put it. I guess he went and put it in his dog kennel, or it used to be a dog kennel at one point. I didn't hear what happened after that, but when I saw the egg thing earlier, and then that reminds me of that story you told. Not that that's what it means, but it could be.
He was given a gift, and it was an animal of some sort.
But it was yes. He couldn't see it. He said it was tubular, or he could see it. It looked like a tube of ground sausage. He described it as. But when he put it in his hand, it had like spikes on it, or little like hairs or something. And he said it was breathing, or he could feel bones in it. It creeped him out. He said he was afraid, didn't know what it was, and he dropped it. And then he picked it back up because they said, this is for you. And he went and put it somewhere. I think that was on the night that he went out to see the lady, or something related to that. But anyway, so if you hear that might make some more sense of it.
Well, the Harbinger in chat says something alive and prickly as some of the descriptors.
That was it. That was it. Alive and prickly. That's what he said.
I don't know what to make of that. David?
I don't know what to make of that either. But although the shape tubular and sausage is sort of not too far off from the idea of the tubes that we've seen, but also the idea of an egg being a bit distorted in shape. But the egg being Easter, right? Because like Cody had, I think whoever it was that had the blue egg thing, right? That's also tied in with the idea of Easter eggs, and also the idea, and I'm just throwing stuff out. I'm not saying if it's correct. It was just ideas that I'm just like seeing. But the idea of a dragon, right? Draco, they're born from eggs is the myth, is that dragons come from eggs, right? So I'm just tossing it out there.
That's an amazing connection. I love that one, because on Cody's egg, Cody, you have the striations. And Game of Thrones, I didn't see all of it, but I saw with Khaleesi, and she has the dragon eggs, and they have those kind of striations on them.
Yeah, it felt like a mineral, like a rock or something. There was one point there where I thought it was like kryptonite in Superman.
That's an interesting thing to think about.
Well, you have these stones. They look like an egg, and they are called dragon eggs. It's a mineral.
Oh,
Yeah, right.
really?
You
Interesting.
can look them up. Yeah.
What color do you know?
Well, brownish black, I think. It's very
Okay.
nice.
Interesting.
Not blue, but
Also, I watched a little bit. No, I listened to a little bit of Area 52 is a YouTube channel with Chris Ramsey, and he's been covering all kinds of esoterica, UFO stuff, remote viewing. He talked to someone yesterday or today about UFOs being covered up by the US military. And one of the things he said was at least one of the crafts that he was somehow involved with was an egg-shaped one as well. So that, I feel like I never heard of egg-shaped UFOs, and then in the last year, everyone's talking to us about egg-shaped UFOs. The cosmic egg also. If Draco comes out of the dragon egg, and that's the beginning of the new era, or I don't know, but something about your data makes me wonder if we've been misled about the pole star changing being a slow transition over thousands of years. You know, we saw in Cody's data that it's something that's expected, but it feels really sudden. I wonder if we have a wrong understanding and we're not ready for what's coming. I don't know. And that's part of the warning, is that it doesn't happen the way we think it's going to happen. Here, Cody, this is what you've been talking about, the gift, and it looks like a star. It's kind of, it has a geometric pattern on it, and it's related to navigation. And John has the exact same shape, and it has points and corners like a pointy Rubik's Cube. And later, John, in your session, you have it sparkling like a jewel. And the idea of liquid dumping down to the surface, I mean, isn't that Aquarius, right? Pouring out the water, the knowledge. And then, Michael, I have your bright flash here as well, tying into all of this. So what do you guys think?
I'll let someone else answer that. I have no clue.
I think it's good data. Yeah. Go ahead, Cody.
To me, it just felt like the way it come through was just something they used to help them navigate. So it's probably a star or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I think sometimes it can be tempting to make things more esoteric than they maybe are. And so I agree with you, Cody. I think your data points to it being a star more than being some kind of a magical object. And I think that John's data definitely backs up that interpretation, I think, as well, right? Sparkling like a gem in the sky. There's more here that back up from Patrick. He's talking about a gift, the idea of predetermination. So if we think of the zodiac from astrology as holding your destiny, right? So all the astrological signs give you the destiny for your age. And we talked earlier about how during the age of Pisces, the fish, Jesus is related to the fish. That's the dominant religion. Prior to that, we have Aries, the ram. The Judaism has a lot of ram symbology, and that's a weird tie. Leo is the sign of the sphinxes are showing up all over the world during the age of Leo. So there's something, that predetermination in relation to the gift. I think that also ties it back to the idea that it's a star. I need to cough. Hold on. Someone else talk while I cough. Muted, please.
Well, somewhere they talked about a ruby. I think it was a metaphor for Regulus star, a ruby. So if I look at the sketch from Cody, it's like how do you call it? In facet, you know, that it's like a ruby.
Yeah, the faceted ruby. And we saw the red, didn't we? The red somewhere where I was saying it would be interesting if the star in Regulus or the new pole star was a red star. Navigate by choice, Patrick has. So again, that idea of navigation, but also the idea of navigating your destiny by choice, zodiac, all of this kind of ties in. The idea of it being like a playground. He has this grid view, which I think ties into everything we've been talking about today, depicted in 2D. It's sphere theory, the theory of a sphere, but he's seeing it depicted in two-dimensional. I think that's really fascinating when we talk about the fake stars, the artificial stars that the military is making in the sky to measure the weakening of the magnetic field. I think that that's really interesting. I didn't know about that until today. So that was a really interesting new piece of data for me. So I thank everyone for their remote viewing sessions that brought that information to me. And then again, here's your map a little bit bigger. And you can see here how I had tied it to Polaris. I think that is an okay fit because you can see how this star, your third star of the Polaris tail, is a little bit brighter, Michael. But I think it works for Draco as well, maybe better. And as you can see here, so here we have Draco in the center, and there's Cepheus there. And so here you have your Draco, and there's your Cepheus.
Yeah, it's uncanny.
It's crazy. It's amazing. And also just the, you know, the Milky Way is all around here, right? So that's all your water, your ocean. And then, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. The 6 wheels in Claudia, your data, every time you have transport, you're always talking about these 2 sets of 3. So I think that that's interesting. And we've talked about it a little bit before. You're talking about transport and just the 6 because the hexagon for Auriga. I think there might be a tie-in with that because he's the charioteer, the transporter. And we saw in Cody's session how he's always relating Auriga to transport, the hexagon with transportation. John, you're telling us about trying to escape something that seems dangerous. It's part of a process. It feels like a transaction. That concerns me. And Michael, your ship is a destroyer vessel, so that's concerning. And then John, you have data here. God is screaming down to me from the clouds or storms above. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a really powerful. Like a lot of times in the past, if I've had sessions that the targets that were related to God, I think one time someone gave me God, and I had the view of like clouds and like light shining down. I think from a young child, I remember like a poster or something that said, "With God, all things are possible," and it was showing light through clouds. So I think like in my head, I associate that visual. So I got that visual of the clouds and kind of and then all of a sudden I just had this like image of like God just shouting down, like and just blaring some sort of message. So I didn't know if that was. I kind of assumed that was related to like kind of like the lady, you know, the Jesus reaching out on another perception I had, that this is a message, whatever this is, prophecy or whatever. But I don't know. But it was a pretty vivid or powerful perception.
It seems like a message that has urgency, that is important, that's really trying to get our attention. And that's why I wonder if it's not just about there are, you know, aliens and UFOs visiting us, because I don't know that that's so urgent, because I feel like, okay, that's everywhere in the news. So that's why I kind of, if God is shouting down at you, what is he saying? And if Chris Bledsoe is being visited by this woman with a bull and it's a translucent bull, and what is right, like the Virgin Mary isn't typically seen with a bull. That's a Mesopotamian myth, and so, or goddess. It's just interesting. So I think there's a lot in all of your data for us to think about as we move forward. Chris, you had these 2 people here. Did you want to say something a little bit about this and the engineer, or?
Yeah, so basically I had a visual of somebody that kind of was looking like a worker on a construction site with a helmet, discussing with someone, saying that whatever they're going to do is not working. So there was something wrong with there. And the other person was kind of suited up. So I got the idea that this was more Caucasian-like and in the US. Something about a research site and some kind of engineer discussion about something where there is something not functioning or something that's misunderstood.
And it seems to be related to archaeology somehow. So again, I don't know, and I'm not saying I believe this, and I'm not saying I think you should too. I'm just saying these are thoughts that are coming to me as I look at the data and I open my perceptual awareness up a little bit to the data stream. It does seem to me that it's pointing to this idea of we have misunderstood something. There's something coming that we need to be warned about. We don't know that we need a warning because we don't understand it. It seems to be related to star alignments. And from your data today, it seems to be related to the pole star changing, which And it looks like maybe we need to go look at archaeological records again and see what happened during the last change of ages. Was there more conflict? Were there more natural disasters? Were there things that we need to pay more attention to? So that's just something that I was thinking when I was looking at that. You've all kind of mentioned this as we've gone through this, but the tubes with sound and frequencies, the bars that become tubes. This is an interesting data point because Claudia, I wanted you to talk to us about this a little bit in terms of the music. But in John's session, at first there's the music, there's the vibrating back and forth of the string, which fits in with your interpretation. But John, you also have this from the front and from the top. And if I look at this at the top, the view from the top being Cepheus, and the view from the front is the bars that we saw in Leo, the bars on the constellations. So there's an underlying point there that I'm not going to make explicit, but I think people should just kind of think about. And Claudia, take it away, Claudia. Tell us about the music.
Well, I had the association with like a church organ. So I heard angelic voices singing and vibration. So it was very light, and the pipes were copper and brass colored. Yeah, the music. I think it was maybe then it was in a church, something like.
So I'm not sure that the location of the church is as important as the meaning of what you've drawn. Yeah. And John, you had sent me a message adding information, so I've added it here, that this idea of flowing energy or wind, and again, the air moving through pipes making sound. What I thought was interesting is you had the sense of it having some sort of will. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How did that feel, that it had some will?
Yeah, that was a really strange one. It was almost like the idea of something shattering out in one direction, kind of like a blast or something, blast through wind or something breaks it and just everything kind of goes in one direction. But right at the end of the perception, it was as if whatever was the wind or the blast of energy or whatever it was, it had will. Like it wasn't just a reaction. Like it was causing it, or it was like a spirit that did it, like some sort of entity. I don't know. It was really strange.
That is interesting tie into the lady.
Yeah.
And then here's just a little bit of data if you guys want to say something about it, but it didn't really fit anywhere else, and I had just kind of collected it here. John, this again, the lifting and dropping and flopping like arms of an octopus. I kind of see that as the star. The star is shifting and flopping around. This is what I've been referring to, Claudia, when you kind of had a very similar sketch as a wormhole. And, I think Jeff and Michael, there was a little bit of correspondences as well, a little bit of resonance in your work as well in a few places. And I wasn't able to make all the connections clear here today because there was so much. Here's a little bit more of Patrick's data that I didn't fit into the slides. But I think this is a really good drawing of the axial tilt.
Yeah.
He's talking about the processing of time like clockwork, right? Amazing data here as well. A process occurring to steady logic, but not fabricated. So a natural kind of, and he has the sense of like clockwork. Recognized in reality, like a glitch? No, more like something stones, like fingerprint embedded code, like our common understanding, our reality, our experience. So something interesting going on there. And he's also talking about, this is a really nice and strange term, logical vibrational. So I don't know how that fits in with this, the data we were talking about here with the frequencies. patterns, containers, right? These are the constellations. It can be rolled out in patterns. So just really good data here. And again, we saw this earlier. He's also talking about the black hole there that fits into, matches some of the other people's data. He does talk, now here's a little bit about stuff that kind of maps onto the plasma orbs. And plasma orbs we have looked at and talked about in our New Year's Eve session, about how the UK discovered that plasma can have some sense of agency. It behaves in ways that seem to suggest that it has some level of consciousness. It can interact with people's consciousness. And so here Patrick is talking about ball lightning, captured isolated process of ball lightning. So I think he's starting to kind of touch on a little bit of these concepts here as well. But a lot of it is about the angles of approach or of opening, layers moving upwards, being connected. So this we saw earlier is the different pole stars and the wobble of the axis. And this is Polaris, and then it'll be this one next. And then here we talked about this already, where he seems to be talking to us about the different stars that are on the edges of Cepheus or some of the constellations. And again, he's talking about a record player. So it's that cyclical, that rotation, and it being some kind of a key. And I think that that's important. It unlocks something. So you unlock the motion, and then all the stars start sliding at an angle, like we saw in some of your sessions. Really nice data here. This again, the route, the map, the labyrinth, the circle, the puzzle. I think that the key elements being about this, the layers, it's not 2D in a literal sense. It's just really nice little data here about the constellations and everything we've kind of been talking about. Again, here the idea of frequency having to do with the rotation. So let's say if this is the North Pole, so does frequency have a role to play in that shift? Is that possible? Can we make sense of that in any way? I'm not sure. He's talking about interference and navigation, which will happen if the pole star shifts away from the center of the sky. Yeah. And so that is the end of the presentation. And we're back. So tell me your overall thoughts, and the audience.
Well, I find it amazing what you made of it again. Yeah, it's very interesting information. Makes me think. Yeah, you go so deep. I really admire that.
Oh, thank you, Claudia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think I just had like much fewer pages than I normally do, and I'm just surprised that in spite of that smaller size, I got as much relevant data as I did. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised by that, and just thankful for everybody else for sharing their own viewpoints, and as well to the analysts for like seeing all these connections that I couldn't really make myself, at least out the gates.
Cheers. And keep an eye on who you're resonating with. It's a good idea to just get a sense of that. I've said it before, but it's always good to track. If you see that you're resonating really well with someone, then you might want to work with them in the future, right? You might want to do some practice targets with them, or because if they're amplifying your ability and you're amplifying their ability, it's a good way to level up in your skills just by taking advantage of that amplification. When you learn how to work at a higher level, then when you work without that person, you still hold on to that capacity to kind of take that extra step up because you've kind of entrained yourself now. So it's a little bit of a tip for remote viewing. What about everybody else?
Yeah, I love your analysis, Sasha. Is something that is not seen within the community, generally speaking. The depth of research and correlations, right? In my opinion. And the other thing that I love to always see is the correlation between the viewers. So again, when I can see multiple people drawing like similar elements or almost exactly the same thing, especially when, you know, like the landmass thing in this particular session, as an example, is very different than two people drawing a cube, right? some simple shape, you're like, that's fascinating, especially if the shape from both viewers has correlating verbal data that matches to some degree, because just the cube by itself, it's like, interesting, right? But if they have a concept that's similar, it's like, wow, right? But when you draw something that's more complex and irregular, and you can see the correlation between the viewers, that's even more difficult to explain from a skeptic perspective, from at least in my opinion. So I like that. And the other thing I love to see also is the viewers over time, right? So I've watched all of you change and grow since Sasha started the live stream. Some of you have been, here from the beginning. Some have joined more in the middle. But like watching both the consistency of the work between, for each individual viewer, but also the growth trajectory for viewers. That's the other thing I'm always looking at as well, because I find that because some of you have really like significantly changed in terms of your ability to communicate complex data, how much data you pull, how relevant it is, the specifics, right? Because the specifics to me in remote viewing is it's one of the things I get really kind of frustrated with, is that remote viewing is very real, and skeptics need to basically just do it for themselves, because then you'll prove to yourself, oh my God, this is real, right? But the part that I see kind of not being taken to the next level that needs to be, and I'm talking just more on the general community basis, is kind of bringing it all up to the next level, which is like, let's shift this out of proof of psychic ability and more into application or actionable intelligence, right? And I see from the viewers in this group information that pushes more into the actionable intelligence component, right? They're shifting much more in that direction. And so I really appreciate that. And that again is driven through specifics, right? Or unique pieces of information that they're able to pull that you can clearly see correlate to the target. So anyways, I'm just saying, like, in general, I appreciate the trajectory. I appreciate kind of the overall picture of watching the group. I enjoy watching the individuals. I enjoy seeing the correlations. I enjoy the depth of analysis. So that's just my thoughts.
That's fantastic.
I just like to say I really like the target. I really appreciate Sasha going through and doing all the work that I don't want to do to get feedback on. I do so many practice targets, or it seems like I do, and it's like, oh, I got to go look at research this so I know what the heck I had right or wrong or whatever, which can take time. So anyway, I really appreciate that. And the group dynamic is really interesting to me, because sometimes I get frustrated because the type of data I get isn't always the type of data I want to get. Like I don't get visuals. I don't have sketches that match, like Cody, it shows some microchip that looks resemble. I don't get that stuff. So it always amazes me how some people do, but then I get something that other people don't. So I really like the fact that depending on the person's background and kind of their makeup, how they can kind of get different types of data and hone in on different aspects. And then when you have a group of people all working the same target, then, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And not only on the different type of data, but what I find interesting in the group setting is the fact that you have different interpretations. Because when you look at your own data, you're focused in your own tunnel. But sometimes when you have somebody else with another perspective trying to make sense of your data, it lights a bulb, and you're like, oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, and you would have never thought about it. So that's pretty cool. And it also shows the importance of analysis if you're really doing remote viewing as a project, not just as a fun target.
Yes, thank you, Chris. And thank you, to the Harbinger in chat. We appreciate the fact you enjoyed that.
So we were on target. We had a lot of correlating data. I want to see how we did with lottery numbers.
I was talking I talked about it before we went on air. We were late going live because for various reasons, but one of them, or we'll just blame it on this. So we did talk about the numbers. So there were some really interesting effects and hesitation. So for the audience, I'll just remind them. I put out a lotto number target for the regular participants of the live stream. So I didn't make it public. It was just for whoever kind of participates regularly, and I just gave them the option. And the results were interesting. And one of the things I said is everyone submitted more than one number. Everyone gave me multiple numbers. And I was saying I do the same, because you just everything hinges on one number. It's so hard to be like, okay, but is it this one or this one? Because I kind of feel like maybe it's one of these, but I can't quite tell which one. So I'm just going to give it to Sasha and she can decide. But the thing is, I'm like, yes, I could use my, try to use my ability and be like, okay, which one feels better? And, if we were doing it for real, maybe I would do that. But I prefer that as remote viewers, you learn to do that yourselves. That I say, okay, you've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 numbers. Fantastic. Now give me one number. So I sent everybody a second email saying, thank you. Now please narrow it down to 1. And so that was really fun. And I'll send you individual results, because I don't want to send everybody all the different numbers, because then I'm kind of clouding the feedback and retroactively making it harder. But there was some really fun little effects, and yeah. And so we didn't get all the winning numbers. Yeah, but we got some, and that was kind of nice. And there was some nice little things happening. And so I want to thank everyone. And I want to echo one thing that David said about Chris and Claudia drawing the exact same terrain with the same number of mountains and the same number of hills. And I talk about this quite often. And John, I'm like you, conceptual viewer, and I'm the same, where I get really frustrated. And so then I really beat myself up a little bit, and I'll force you need to get physical data. Like, you're not moving on until you get a physical description of this page. But then sometimes I do that for things that are conceptual. And and then 7 days later, and I'm sick and I'm stressed. And David's like, maybe you should just submit your session so that I can give you feedback. So I know that, like, it's something that you can overcome. But an automatic writing helps with that. And this is where we see, you can tell in Chris and in Claudia and Cody's sessions that they didn't do a whole page of like, where is this hill? Where does it feel? No, like you can see with Claudia's sketch, right? You're kind of drawing, the automatic writing is kicking in, and you're just kind of trusting your hand is drawing. Maybe you're like, oh, maybe I should add a little extra mountain here. Right? But you're not necessarily having to see it vividly in front of you in order to get the sketch to match the exact details, right? Some people will see the exact mountain with all the hills, the exact detail, and they'll draw the exact thing they saw. A lot of people won't. They'll be like some kind of a landscape, but then when they draw it, they add in the detail. The hand draws in the detail. It's this embodiment of data. You have the data that you're consciously aware of having been given, but then your body also has data. And if you can just trust yourself, that will come through. And so, yeah, definitely good job for Claudia and Cody on that. And also, John, yes, you do get conceptual data, but it's valuable data. You get a lot of the meaning, and you get a lot that helps with the interpretation. There's often been times where I see other people's data and they just kind of have something, and I'm like, okay, I don't really know what I'm going to do with that yet. And then I open your session and I'm like, oh, there's the meaning that I needed to put these things together in a way that makes sense. So there's, especially when you have a team of viewers, you don't need everyone to do everything. When you're a lone viewer, you want to be able to tell the story. You want to be able to do a session that's good enough that the analyst can get what they need out of it. But working with an analyst that gets to know your style, they can decode things, right? And so I think that's, yeah. And, we saw today, you drew the constellation of Pegasus. You had Lacerta in the exactly correct position in relation to it. And then you had Cygnus, the birds flying away from it. So you're still getting visual information. Yeah, so I think that was amazing to see. Everyone did really, really well. Jeff, just to address something that David said about the progression, I see that with your work, you know, over the last year, your site sketches, like we said earlier, like and again, it's a bit of that automatic data, you know, like you're seeing the constellations as clusters of people, and they're at a funeral, and they're this at an event. It's the data is coming through you in a way that's getting easier and easier to analyze, right? And so that's really nice, and less personal overlay, more of an overlay that's easier for me to kind of peel back sometimes, I think. So yeah, it's really nice to see. It's inspiring, right? I see everyone kind of, like David is saying, everyone improving and progressing and being a part of this. It's really fun. I really like it. And, you know, I like it when you guys give me data that I can go a little explore in little fun ways. So that was really fantastic. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate that you guys, you know, give me good data to work with. And that you allow me to explore it in my own little ways.
The other thing real quick, John, even if you sometimes, based on what you just said, get frustrated with not like literal drawing of the target in the way that you would like sometimes, which I understand because I've been able to do that. And then there's other times when I'm not, you know, I'm not necessarily doing that. So it's like, I'm just saying like, it's a tricky skill. But there are times when I've seen your session work, and this goes for everybody here in different ways, right? Some people it's come through in a drawing, some people it's come through verbally, some people have done both, but I'm saying like I've seen all of you do it. But John specifically, I remember several of your sessions that you've done, like the words that you're using are like 100%. Like either calling target or basically describing, I mean, not calling target, but maybe describing the concept of the overall target in a way that's very direct, like not indirect, like very direct hits. And these are verbalizations, right? And so even if you're not getting the drawing, I've seen you still communicate the information in a different form. And like I said, I've seen all of you do this in the same kinds of ways, just in different scenarios. Because again, somebody might, like Cody, I've seen some really amazing drawing type stuff like that, the microchip kind of thing, or other situations like that. But then he'll also, he's gotten stuff that's verbal too. So, and I've kind of seen that with all of you. So yeah, I'm just saying like, I wouldn't get too hung up on it. Just keep trying to improve. But yeah, you guys are all hitting the target. It's great.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I'm looking at all your faces and I'm like, everyone has had at least one session, if not multiple sessions, where they tell me the big summary, right? Jeff, you've done it. Michael, you've done it. I'm thinking of the telepathy tapes. Chris, you've done it. John, you have done it. Cody, you've done it. Claudia, you've done it. Like, you've all had at least one session where there was one page in your session, or there was a number of pages where I was like, they've told the whole story. They have everything here. And it's always amazing to see. So yeah, so you guys are doing really well. The resonance is really good. It's hard to pick targets. I try to be unpredictable, but at the same time, I want targets that are going to be somewhat relevant, somewhat interesting, not too current that as soon as you get to page 2, you're like, oh, I know what I'm working on. So I thought this one might be an interesting blend. I was surprised, to be honest. I thought we would get data about UFOs or about spiritual beings, and we did, but oh yeah, it seemed to me that it was more about the stars and the alignment and all of this. And that seemed to be where everyone's emphasis was. So when I look at people's session, I look at what they say, this feels really important. So, you know, in Cody's session where he's like, the shape of this one feels really important. I keep coming back to it. And Chris saying, I keep coming back to the number 4. It keeps kind of nagging at me, and it's everywhere in my session, right? I look at those things and it gives me a sense of, oh, everyone feels like these constellations are really important. This transitioning, right? So those are the kind of things that I try to use to lead my interpretation. And like I said, I had a whole different interpretation, a whole different story to tell today. And then yesterday, someone submitted a session and I was like, Oh, I see. Okay, I have to start over now because there's this whole other story that needs to be told, that wants to be told, because it connected all these different pieces in the data. It's just like this domino effect. And
So,
so, yeah.
so Sasha, as the analyst, quick summary for the end of the video. What, like 1 minute or 30 seconds or 1 minute, what is your overall summary of the results, the collation of all this information? What does it tell you? The viewers' data, not the viewers themselves, just the viewers' data. What is it indicating for this target?
I'm so cannot ever be concise, but I will do my very, very best. What I see is the target was, tell me about, and I didn't say the lady that is or that visited Chris Bledsoe. I worded my taskings very clearly, so it was, the lady that Chris Bledsoe claims to have witnessed, right? So I really left it so that I'm not putting an interpretation. And what I see from your data, there's a warning about the pole star changing. It seems significant. There's an aspect of timing, but I didn't see a strong urgency. There was an urgency about getting the message out, but there didn't seem to be an urgency about doing anything. It was more just being aware, and also the idea of understand that there are misunderstandings, that we have to reinterpret something, that we've missed something along the way. Yeah. And it's not what I expected. I expected something about, I don't know, orbs and some of his experiences talking to this woman. But I think I kind of prefer that it's not what I expected, because I feel like maybe it's more truthful. And what do you think?
And to summarize, although you don't have probably enough strong data, and I know Claudia is the one that's bringing in the key piece of information here. There may be others, but this is the one I remember. Because again, I'm thinking from the audience perspective that's watching this video, like what are they going to ask, or what do they want when they walk away from this video? That's why I'm asking you to summarize. Do you have, because this is what people would ask, right? They were sort of paying attention through some of this, and some of it they weren't, and, they're fading in and out, right? Well, when is this going to happen? Did the remote viewers tell us, when is this going to happen? Did they give you any indication? And we know what Chris has said, which you can summarize, Bledsoe, or however you say his last name, but did the viewers come back with confirmation of any of that?
I feel like it's not something that's going to happen in April 2026. I feel like that's not correct. I don't see that in the data. I feel like what the data is suggesting is that it's more of a stretched out transition. I do feel, that there's definitely messages of destruction, and I did in my subtask and ask something about the timing of the event in our lifetimes or not. And so I feel like it's not something that's going to happen over the course of a day or a month. Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's telling us to pay attention. I think people need to start learning their constellations and what it means. I also, and here's, I'm trying to be concise. Something about the declination. So when you want to know where you are, you can't just take a compass and be like, oh, magnetic north is that way, so I have to walk this way to get to where I'm going if the electricity goes out. So let's say the electric grid gets taken out, solar flare, whatever it is, and you need to walk somewhere. Your compass doesn't tell you where north is. It tells you have to take into account something called magnetic declination, which is like the magnetic field line that runs through your city might be a little bit wonky on its way to the North Pole. And you usually need to have like tables that tell you, okay, your magnetic declination is 4 degrees. So you have to say, okay, this is where I think north is, and I have to actually walk 4 degrees that way to actually get to the real north. It seems to me that what this is saying is that system will not work, and you won't be able to use the pole star either. And so that tells me that that's a longer time frame, because right now the pole star is solidly in the center of our sky. I do think that the data suggests that it's not a slow transition that takes thousands of years. I think it happens a lot sooner. I don't know how that makes sense, but that's what the data points to.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then the viewers, does anybody else want to kind of say something to cap it off, or something that we missed in the summary or in your data, or John, the hand and the ball. I think we'll have to add at some point. I will have for any of you who want it, we'll put your profiles up on our website when we get to that. And then you can upload whatever sessions you want to share with the public. And if this is one, then you could stress that, or we could put notes.
Okay. I want to wrap it up because it's almost 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
I just want to be mindful of people's time. So yeah,
Thank
if anybody
you,
has any
everyone.
final thoughts, then
Yeah,
let
final
us know.
thoughts.
Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up.
So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you. And also for the analysis, like I do go in depth. I understand that. And sometimes you might be like, what is happening? But I think it's valuable in two ways. Like, oh, do you? Oh, good. I do think it's good, to see what the data can show, to dig for more meaning, and to use it as an opportunity to learn more about the topic, learn more about your reality, learn more about the science around it. We're so busy watching short 30-second reels, apparently TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. We're so busy consuming garbage content that doesn't really help us. Like, everyone's been talking to me about the war, but I'm like, okay, but I've been hearing the same things 3 weeks ago as I'm hearing today. So there's been no progression. There's just as much doubt about what the hell is happening as there was 3 weeks ago. So we can all watch it and talk about it, but we're not actually moving forward. Whereas I think this is an opportunity to say, well, at least we're going to learn something, and hopefully it'll be useful. And also, I try to sprinkle in little secrets so that, like, throughout my little live stream, so that if you can kind of interpret things a little bit deeper, or if you have your own if you've done your research, or if you have a different kind of knowledge base, you might be able to pick some of those up. So for the audience, if you kind of pick up on things, feel free to leave little Easter eggs in the comments below to show that you caught something. That would be fun. And so, yeah. So everyone, thank you. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to everybody in chat. Non Pareil Storyteller, the Pole Shift, the Younger Dryas. Check out our channel for our recorded videos that are edited. We have some videos on the Pole Shift, and we're going to be releasing more over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And with that, thank you to everyone, and we will see you all again soon. Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night. Good day.